Good evening. Today is Windrush Day, a day which has had significant impact on our recent history. And good evening and welcome to this council meeting. I am Councillor David Lindsay and I'm the Mayor. In June 2017, 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives in the fire at Grenfell Tower. I ask every member of the Council to pay our deepest and continuing respects in the conventional manner by marking the moment with 72 seconds of silence now. Would everyone please stand? Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are these now agreed as a correct record? I report with sadness the death in service on the 1st of June of this year of Bhupinder Verdi, who worked in our housing and had been with the council for 18 years. Our thoughts are with his family and friends. I also report with sadness the death of Councillor Carol Caruana, who represented Colville Ward on the council from 2009 to 2014. In her time as a councillor, she sat on the Housing, Environmental Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committees, Planning Committee and the Licensing Committee. I shall now ask the Chief Executive to report apologies for absence or lateness from this meeting.
I've received apologies from Councillor Mona Adam, Councillor Emma Dent Code, Councillor Quentin Marshall, Councillor Abdullah Noor, Councillor Portia Thaxter and Councillor Linda Wade. I don't know if there are any other apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do any members have a disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter before the council this evening? Thank you.
I take that as being no. This evening we've set aside up to an hour to hear contributions from members of the public. I will now hand over to Susan Ritchie to facilitate this part of the meeting.
Thank you. Evening, everybody. The roaming mics aren't working, so you'll have to forgive me for leaning over on you. We've got the 8 speakers this evening, and the first 6 are related to Powys Square. So we're going to take the first 3 are related to ASB, antisocial behaviour in Powys Square, and the second 3 are more about the refurbishment and the development of that. So we're going to hear the first 3 questions first, and then ask for a response, and then the second 3 and ask for a response, if that's okay. So the first speaker is Emma Ball, and the second one, Carol Glasgow. So Emma, do you want to go first?
Can you hear me okay? I'm here representing many on Powys Square, some elderly that can't make it here this evening, and some who have a little bit of mental instability, and just other people on the square. My question is regarding Powys Square. Are you aware just how much a noise from a basketball makes when it bounces on the ground and hits the metal hoop with force? Representing the residents here who live opposite and around the hoop, it comes resounding into our homes in every room of our flats, affecting the enjoyment of our homes with its discordant rhythm, which affects the nervous system and makes us on high alert, along with all the other noises that comes along with the shouting, shrieking, often music playing very loud and yelling. And the square sometimes is a place where music systems are set up illegally, and we are impacted by the noise that is just come straight into our homes. Please can the residents be considered before the refurbishment of Powys Square? I think there needs to be a link between the park police, the council, the housing trust, the people who want to use the park, which should be us as well, because it's really impacting on the enjoyment of our homes, and it often gets worse at the weekends when we're trying to relax. One particular residence in my own building has mental health issues, and she's often out on the street yelling at the innocent basketball players, but she walks around with earphones on her head day and night in her own flat, just to show you the levels of the noise that we're all enduring, and it is infecting all of our mental health, albeit to varying different degrees. And I'm just hoping that we can come to a compromise, because at the moment it feels like it's a sacrifice of the enjoyment of our homes, and I'd really like you to answer these questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm also a long-term resident of Powys Square. I've lived there for 35 years, but also a long-standing member of the Colville ward. I have for many years experienced antisocial behaviour on our street, the Talbot Road side of Powys Square, really impacting on the peaceful enjoyment of our flat on the ground floor, coming home after a long day at work or a busy week at work, not having the opportunity to walk peacefully, and often my doorstep and porches could hold up to 10 people, smoking cannabis, drinking alcohol, having food delivered on scooters, playing music, and just generally chatting. Although I'm not intimidated by this, because I'm extremely polite, and those young people are very polite to me, there are people in my house that are not comfortable with this. There are people that have mental health issues, there's someone with a disability, and I'm here representing my house number 32. I would like to know how our Colville Ward councillors could support us residents with the antisocial behaviour that takes place regularly under our porches. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And so the last question in that block is from Nicole Hellis, who is asking, she would like to know what the council is doing about the antisocial behaviour in Powys Square. Yeah.
Councillor Will.
Thank you. Firstly, can I say thank you to Emma and Carol for actually coming and speaking. I know myself quite how nerve-wracking it is standing up here in front of everyone, and I get to do it more regularly than you, so thank you. There's a generic title, but there's quite a few different issues in there, and I'll try and address them, and this probably won't be a full response, and we'll probably give you a fuller response. If I can just talk about the park ASB first, and then address your questions, Carol. So I am aware that some people find the noise from the basketball very, very disturbing, and I can imagine at this time of year it's worse because everyone's got their windows open and everybody's out late. And I was kept myself up last night with some people partying in a garden meeting. So I do understand it's stressful and unpleasant. I know that our Parks Police have been doing patrols in the park, and we've asked them to do extra patrols. I know one of the issues perhaps is that it's always been closed on time, and so people are hanging around after they should be, and or they're climbing over the fence to get into to do stuff as well. So we will try and put extra resource in to make sure that the immediate problem, if you like, is looked at. But it is, I guess, a bit of an ongoing battle, particularly when the weather's nice. With regard to the basketball, the sort of long term of the basketball and the consultation and the plans to improve Powis Square, I'm sure you're aware there's a meeting next week. I know absolutely no decisions have been made about the ballpark area yet, and it is very important that whatever we do, it's something that residents, there is some kind of consensus and residents are happy about. I know the sort of things that are being looked at, and we would certainly be happy to do, is if the basketball stays, and that's what all residents want, we can put in things that help with the noise. There's a board that goes behind, different stuff on the ground to try and absorb noise. So all of those things can be looked at. But as I say, nothing's been decided on that, and that is obviously going to form the next part of the sort of consultation around Powis Square, and it sounds like you'll be there and part of that, and representing your neighbours as well. So thank you. On the ASB outside of, well, it's all connected, isn't it? Again, and I know you've sort of specifically put that question to some of your new councillors. I know last year I think we had some really particular problems, and there was a Met operation around that. I seem to think there's CCTV camera. There are CCTV cameras in. Again, I think it feels to me like we've just got to ramp that all up again. We have obviously asked the police, the local police, get our wardens. We are adding more wardens to just do more patrols. I'm not sure more CCTV is probably the answer because you've got CCTV already. But as with all ASB, it's a sort of a continuing process. But thank you for raising it, and I will be I have already, and I'll talk again about officers, but really, I know the summer months and up to Carnival can be a particularly noisy time there, so we will do our best to try and alleviate the problems for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And who from the... Okay.
Hi. Thank you, Emma and Carol. So yeah, I mean, number one, you're absolutely right. You really shouldn't be dealing with this. Now, as far as a sort of diagnosis of what you're talking about, I have a slightly different view, which is that what's happened over the pandemic, as I understand from speaking with your neighbours, is that it's become a destination, right? So it's become a destination for people during the pandemic, take the little bit of exercise, and personal trainers go down there and charge, and people are playing basketball all hours. So it's a lot worse than it used to be, as far as I know. So I mean, really the long-term answer is that we actually need to completely reassess this so-called consultation process, which we'll speak a little bit more about following the next few questions. And really go back to a process which starts with you guys, starts with the people that actually live there. And then after that, we can talk about, other local interest groups, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the most important thing is that in the long term, we actually think about what the space is going to be. Yeah, I mean, I know how crazy it can make you having that kind of noise around. And really, in the short term, I'm meeting with the Parks teams next week, and I'll speak a bit about that When I speak to them, obviously I'll sort of put that off until I can actually have more meetings with residents, because, like I say, it needs to start with you. We can take from there. I mean, it's a small place. You know, it's a small space, Power Square, and and at the moment it's a hub. People are just sort of flocking in there from all over. I know you've seen people putting up in their BMWs, you know, to let their kids sort of play there, and that's just not appropriate for that space. Yeah, I take on board all of that, and thanks for bringing it up.
So the next three questions, the first one is going to be asked by Claire Olinsky, and then the next one is Nick Koretsky.
Hello, I've lived on Powys Square since 1992. My question is, why has the Powys Square refurb consultation process been so opaque? Why are so few residents aware of it even now? And what will be done to rectify this?
My essential question to the Chamber is really, can something be done at this stage to halt, pause and rethink these plans which have gone effectively, de facto, really unconsulted for several years? And we have ground apparently being broken in February. It was supposed to be in February, and now it's apparently June. And we have 5% of the people in Powys Square are a member of the Powys Square steering group. 36% of the members of the Powys Square steering group don't live on or adjacent to Powys Square. This just seems to me so anti-democratic, so autocratic and not democratic. And yet, the executive don't listen to us. We keep getting given platitudes. For example, about 2 or 3 months ago, Sarah Brian, who is heading the project, said that she was going to try and find ways and means for the residents of the square to have more weight, in our opinions, than people who lived 2 and 3 blocks away. And there are 2 people in particular who live 2 and 3 streets away who have made it their life business to reorganize our lives. And it's objectionable. What's also objectionable is that the council did not actually bother to send letters via the Royal Mail to us. And when I was last in this room, I asked Monica Press, the ex-councillor, why this was, and her lame excuse, which she prefaced by saying wasn't an excuse, was that Notting Hill Genesis properties tend not to have letterboxes. It's just been a whitewash, and I think there are many of us who are just fed up with it now.
Thank you, Nick. The next speaker is Arnaud Pitois.
Hi, everybody. First of all, what I'm proposing to do tonight is to talk to you with the noise level which I've recorded in my home 24 hours ago. This is not abstract. It was yesterday, the longest day of the year, 6 o'clock in my home. Enjoy. I hope you can hear it. Since 2017, the Council has promised to review and exercise a robust culture change program across its operation. Oh, there's the basketball, by the way. Can you hear this? Can you hear this? This is 12 hours every day from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10:30 at night. This is not abstract. This is our living rooms, our bedrooms, every day. When I come back from work in the evening, I don't think about spending my evening. I anticipate, is there going to be mayhem outside my window? But of course, the officers, Ulash Keria, Terry Oliver, and Sarah Bryan, sort of intimated that I live on the square. If I don't like it, why don't I just move? I've built my life in Kensington and Chelsea. Mr. Mayor, your predecessor, gave me my UK citizenship. I do not entertain the idea of moving elsewhere because, as Terry Oliver told us, Paris Square is a much loved and well-used space. By who? We don't know these people, okay? I live on the square, my neighbors live on the square, and this is hell. 10:30 tonight, when you are going to bed, this is what's happening to us. So I'm here tonight to beseech you, and I want you to put all your political might to help us getting rid of this nightmare. And as our new councillor said, this is now a destination for the North Kensington and Westminster every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to all of you for coming to speak, and I had the opportunity to introduce myself. I think everything you've said underlines the importance of these spaces to our residents, and that's something I share. I'm going to come to some of the specific points you made, and I should say this is not a thorough answer to everything you're answering. We will write in more detail, and there is a meeting next week, but just wanted to give a little bit of background because we've got a new councillors in the chamber tonight who don't know some of the history of this and what this is part of. So I just wanted to sort of share the fact that we've been doing a lot of refurbishments in a lot of parks, and Power Square is one of them, and we've tried to adopt broadly the same process in all, that we advertised it as widely as possible. I think in the case of Power Square, we sent out 5,000 leaflets, and I'm sorry if they didn't go by Royal Mail, and it's a point taken, and thank you. But, you know, the intention was good, even if the delivery perhaps wasn't as effective. And then there were pictures, and there were posters in the square, in the tabernacle, it was on our website, we had drop-in sessions. Eventually, as you've alluded to, a group was set up with Monica Press, who was the former Culver councillor, who she chaired that, and there have been many more meetings, there's been more letters sent out. Can you...
So many people still do not know about these plans.
I'm going to address that point, if I may. Thank you. I know the last mailing that was done, and I don't know if it was Royal Mail or not, again, 973 households. Zero in our letterbox. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just giving everyone a general sense of what has been done. I'm not arguing at all that you have not received things. What I was going to say is, I think it has absolutely been our intention to consult as widely as we can, including everybody who lives in the square. Clearly, it has not always been successful. You haven't received things. I can only apologise for that. But I think the point that I'm trying to make to you and to colleagues, it was our intention to be inclusive when possible, and it was also our intention to get as many of you involved as possible. And that continues, and that's a really important point, because you have said that you were concerned about the opaqueness, and what I'm trying to say is there's been no intention to be opaque. These meetings have been advertised, as I say, in the park itself, on the notice board, to those who knew, etc. I mean, we will share with you all the details again, but you know, the reality is you feel you weren't told, you didn't know about it, and you haven't been consulted, and I'm sorry for that, and I can't change. But you are all aware, and I know you have, Mr. Pitois, you have been to some of the meetings, and I know you're all coming to the meeting next week, and you know, and that is important. If I may just sort of pick up some of the specific points, I've already talked a little bit about the basketball, and I do understand that this is something that's clearly making a lot of residents very unhappy. As I said, no decisions have been made about the ballpark. Really, the only piece of the consultation that we've kind of moved forward with in any great way is the children's playground. And the reason we've done that is that the playground is now in very poor repair, and it's been promised for many years we would prove it. And that is the main item on the agenda at the meeting next week. That's not to say we won't talk about these other very important things that you want to talk about as well. But I just want to make a plea about the children's playground. And I should stress, this is not my decision. This is for you and residents to decide. If it were possible to get some agreement around the children's playground, that would be a good thing, I think, because it has become very tatty and there are issues with that. So that's just about the meeting next week. Returning to the basketball, as I said, nothing's been decided about that. You're obviously going to pick that issue up. I've explained to Emma here that if the basketball stays, and again, that's not my decision, that's for residents to decide what happens going forward. There are things we can do. In the meantime, we need to make sure we police the park properly, that it closes when it should, and that we try and minimise the disruption, which I do really understand you are suffering. In summary, and I guess what I want to say, this hasn't been a perfect process. I absolutely accept that. In the best will in the world, it's not always possible to contact everyone. I think we have tried, but we obviously haven't always hit the mark, and I accept that. But I think colleagues listening tonight will understand from having listened to you that there is a great deal of passion about this subject. And the important thing is that we find a consensus. As I said, there's a meeting next week. I hope we can agree about the playground only, and if people can't agree, then so be it. Again, it's not for me to tell you. And then there are those other key things about the landscaping, the ballpark, which are still to be really discussed, and I hope you will be very much part of whatever discussions go forward on that. As far as I'm concerned, there's still a long way to go on all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
I want it to be recorded in this meeting that I hear what you said, and I agree that the council has tried to do the best they can. Please give me a minute. Please give me a minute, please, because this has been going on for too long, okay? You don't live on the square.
Excuse me, I'm really sorry, but it goes into other residents'
No, it's
so
going to take 10 seconds. It would be finished by now. I will not be shut down. You know what you're saying, Emma, and I want to work with you. We all want to work with you. Out of the 500 letters, 0 has been received. And I prepared a little speech. I'm going to write one line, and I get off. Okay? In 2019, for instance, the survey reached 44 users of the square, 0 resident. Now the decisions are being made on that survey, 0. Thank you, councils.
Thank you, Arno. Councillor Toby Benton.
Thank you. Thanks again. I mean, I'm afraid, respectfully, I have to reject Councillor Will's assessment of this process. And, especially thank you to Arnaud, Nick and Claire today, because, if you're not the kind of freak that dedicates huge parts of their time to local politics, this is actually a really draining process. So I really appreciate you bringing this to us. First thing I would say after that is that I'm not Monica Press. I think it's safe for us to say that the Labour group is under new management, and I will actually go further and apologise for the disdain with which she has treated residents of Colville Ward. That's really not acceptable. Well, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, fine. So, okay. So yeah, look, everyone has wonderful intentions. When you go to the council, everyone means to be a terribly fair process and listen to the residents. It's just not true. The council has form on this. I'm a council tenant in the borough. I know how the council treats social tenants. And what passes for consultation simply is not consultation. It doesn't actually pass the sniff test. I also know that once having heard many meetings in that the PSSG exists, residents have been either excluded or just not allowed to vote. This entire process is not fit for purpose. It never has been. Letters and flyers popping through the letterbox every now and again, even if they do get through, doesn't cut it. We have the resources in the council to actually go out to people, knock on their doors and speak to them. And we don't do that. Right. And I would actually go further than what Nick says and say that it's not really about consulting with everyone, including the residents. It should start with the residents. We need to actually start with a process that empowers local people where they live to decide what happens in their area. And that would go a huge way to solving all the problems we have with antisocial behaviour, which we've already discussed. The fact is, I can't see no rational way that this process makes sense, which isn't that, you know, somebody has come up with an idea and then they try and sort of gather people around and keep as much from residents as possible. That's just what I see. Just to conclude, I think you're absolutely right. It's a process that needs to be completely overhauled, and specifically this PSSG group right now, as you know, I've been put forward to chair this group. I think everything needs to be absolutely stopped and started from the ground up, starting with you, starting with the residents, because it just isn't acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So the next speaker is Angela Birch, and she wants to talk to you about the safety around Fox School area.
Hello, thank you. So my name is Angela Birch, and I'm here representing the parents of Fox Primary School. We are asking you to address our concerns of the traffic safety accessing the school. Specifically, the roads surrounding it, which are Edge Street, Kensington Place, Campden Hill and Kensington Church Street. There have been numerous near-fatal incidents of children just trying to access the school on these streets, and that the danger's ever present, and we're just sort of sitting there waiting for an accident to happen. Parents have been so concerned about the street that they've actually implemented their own temporary closure scheme for a year now, whereby the parents are manning barriers themselves at drop-off and pick-up at the school. Unfortunately, these are mainly mothers who are doing this to protect their children, but they're getting quite a lot of abuse from drivers trying to come into the school, which isn't really fair. So what we're looking for, and we've written to the council for, is a more permanent solution to this problem that doesn't involve our parents being abused. So on that note, what we would like to do is we would like a councillor to take personal responsibility for this, a named person, given that it's a child safety issue. And we would request that councillor or a delegate would meet with us as the Parents Association at Fox Primary School at a drop-off or a pick-up to help evaluate what could be done. We have our own suggestions of what we think the solutions could be that we have written to the council about, but we think it would be really beneficial if somebody could come and help us evaluate what could be done. There are several other boroughs that have implemented such solutions to keep access to primary schools safe. So I'm sure there's other London boroughs that could help our BKC with solutions here, so we wouldn't, this is a tried and tested process that has happened in other boroughs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for coming tonight. Obviously, children's safety is something we take very seriously here in Kensington and Chelsea. Unlike Hammersmith and Fulham, we've already implemented over 9 school streets in the borough. These are, I think, the things that you reference on Edge Street, which operates 5 days a week. I do appreciate there is an issue with manning the school streets, and that is something we are looking at. There's alternative systems that we can perhaps explore, be it camera enforcement, be it sort of working with the teachers themselves. I do appreciate there is a working garage on Edge Street as well, which does complicate things. It's a very narrow road as well. So what I would offer to do is obviously take you up on the offer that you suggest. I'd be more than happy to come, man the barricades, so to speak, and actually see it for myself with my own eyes. There's always a solution to these sorts of things. There's plenty of ways to tackle problems, and we do really want people bringing their kids to school on foot or on scooters or things like that, rather than by car. So I think actually the solution might be beneficial for everybody. And I'll probably, looking around to Camden Ward colleagues, perhaps come along with one of them. One of your councillors there is nodding away, so perhaps we can work together with your ward colleagues, ward councillors, to solve this issue. So thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you, Angela. Before I start, Mr. Mayor and Ms. Ritchie, could I just ask for a point of decorum? It was Councillor Benton's first ever opportunity to speak, and I don't think that the booing and hissing in response to what he was saying was at all necessary from the majority party. And just to be clear...
Councillor Lowry, can I say something? Standing Order 25, Spot 02, says a councillor shall not indulge in tedious repetition, irrelevance or unbecoming language, nor shall they impute motives to or make reflections of a personal character upon another councillor or councillors. Well, I say no more.
Well, no, actually, you're wrong, Mr. Mayor, because that person that's referred to is not a councillor. So, Mr. Mayor, you're wrong, Mr. Mayor. You're
Councillor
wrong.
Preth is a former councillor, and I think, Councillor Lowry, can I continue?
You may.
Councillor Preth is a former councillor, and I think that the sense of the standing orders is such that a similar standard should be expected for former councillors, and talking about them as for current councillors.
So when we mentioned Councillor Fielding, Mellon and councillors responsible for the time of the Grenfell Tower disaster, I think we should revise that standing order. So can I also mention decorum is necessary. I don't think that was respectful towards Councillor Benton, and going forward we shouldn't have booing and hissing during the public speaking. That's just my point. In response to Angela, thank you for coming to ask your question today. It is a travesty that children and parents feel unsafe. It is testimony to the cavalier attitude that this council has had towards local transport for some time and road and pedestrian safety, because don't forget that it took years for this council to implement the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in defiance with most London boroughs, despite an overwhelming call from residents to do so. It was in fact the work of Labour councillors in opposition lobbying for 20 miles an hour that it eventually got implemented, and that took years and years, and many of us, both current and former councillors, were on that campaign. The council has recently been trialling, or was trialling, a school safe streets programme in North Kensington, whereby certain streets outside schools are shut to general traffic during those key periods. And that was trialled in my ward up in Goulburn in North Kensington. So I hope RBKC can consult diligently with yourselves. And let me continue. This is exactly what I'm saying. So it can be implemented permanently. However, we cannot also ignore the issue of cycle lanes, because I want to thank and congratulate Fox School staff, parents and pupils who tried so hard to lobby the council to reconsider its decision to tear out what was your very first, only safe, accessible cycle path, allowing staff and children safe and protected access to your school. And at the same time, the cycle lane fulfilled the council's own policies towards healthy living and environmental protection. We no longer have a cycle lane, a waste of hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money, thanks to the individuals sitting over there. But I wish you the best of luck dealing with them, because their sheer incompetence leaves much to be desired, and it will be the children who suffer as a result of it.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry. The next speaker is Joe Powell, who wants to talk about dirty money.
Council, the residents of this borough responded with incredible generosity and empathy to the invasion of Ukraine, from mobilising charitable donations to support for refugees. But there is much more we can and should do. I'm sure many of you are aware we are at the epicentre of London's dirty money addiction, which has fuelled autocrats and dictators around the world and has fuelled inequality in our borough. The Kensington Against Dirty Money campaign, which I co-founded with a group of residents, councillors, charities, local institutions and businesses, has mobilised thousands of people to call for change. If we take property in this borough as just one example, we have over 6,000 properties in Kensington and Chelsea registered anonymously overseas, mostly to shell companies in tax havens. The top two destinations are the British Virgin Islands and Jersey. And I can assure Council it is not residents of the British Virgin Islands and Jersey who own those properties. At the same time, we are #1 in the country for empty homes. 1 in 8 homes, empty or second homes. And of course, many of those properties are the very same properties that are owned in tax havens overseas. Now we have new national legislation that passed in March after an 8-year wait that will finally give us a public register of who owns and controls property in this country. But that's only the start of what we need to change. So our question as a campaign to councillors here is, what plans are being made by this council to use the information in the forthcoming public registry of foreign-owned property to combat dirty money in Kensington and Chelsea? What action is being taken to tackle our empty homes problem, especially given we have over 3,000 households on the council waiting list and over 2,000 households in temporary accommodation? And what other steps will this council take at a local level to ensure that Kensington sheds its reputation as the #1 destination in the country for dirty money, including consideration to joining the Councils for Fair Tax Declaration, supported by the Cooperative Party and others, that would ensure local council procurement does not go to companies who are using tax havens, and that we have full ownership information of those companies and full financial reporting. Our campaign would welcome the opportunity to meet with councillors from all parties to discuss this further, and we look forward to your response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and for all of the work that your campaign group has been doing. I understand that one of the people involved in the campaign is former Councillor Monica Press, who I want to also pay tribute to in this chamber for all of the work that she did on the council. I think we can all agree that we want to keep so-called dirty money out of the borough. This borough should welcome inward investment and should welcome people who want to come and make their lives in the borough, but we don't want dirty money. And although this is a low tax borough in lots of ways, it's a matter of fairness that people pay their way and they pay their share. Councils have limited powers to tackle this. We can't, for example, sanction individuals or seize property, and nor should we seize property. These are matters, though, largely that you've addressed for national government, and we welcome their action on this. I know that the government is taking it very seriously, and I know that in the Lords, for example, there's been a lot of work done on it over the past couple of years. In relation to empty homes, we do charge triple council tax on long-term empty homes, which I think is the most that we possibly can under the current legislation. And that's to incentivise occupation. We do want homes to be lived in. I recognise there's a housing crisis and that we do need to build more homes as well to try and tackle that. And we also have empty homes officers who investigate empty homes across the borough to try and root out the problem where it arises in terms of that long-term emptiness. I'm very happy to come and meet with you over the course of the coming weeks and months to discuss these issues further, and I take these matters incredibly seriously, as I'm sure colleagues across the chamber do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, for coming this evening and talking to us, as well as all other citizens of this great borough of ours, for coming down and expressing your democratic views, and hopefully a solution will be found for all the reasons that you're here for this evening. If I may start, first of all, we take this issue very seriously, dirty money, and in fact, over the weekend, Mr. Mayor, when everyone else was enjoying the weekend of the sunshine, I was told to attend a dirty money conference to actually make sure a conference for the Labour local government associations, and one of the agenda items was dirty money and how to deal with dirty money. And I think that's most important, that Labour is taken very, very seriously, rather than saying something about we're going to do and nothing can be done about it. And I think it's important to know that not only this borough, Kensington and Chelsea, but also Hammersmith and Fulham, have just been mentioned before, is doing an amazing job, as well as the new leader of Westminster, the new Labour leader of Westminster, is doing an amazing job about it. And he, I can tell you, has met some of the event organizers to deal with this issue. I think that we are taking this issue very, very seriously. Why? You've mentioned the 3,000 of our residents are in a waiting list, and over 2,000 of them are out of borough in temporary accommodations, and I think that is something we need to do about it. As I said before, we take this issue very seriously, and my leader, the Labour Group leader, Emmerdon Code, the former MB, has already been dealing with this issue, and I would like to meet with you and with my leader, as well as hopefully with the current Conservative leader, to talk about this issue and inform and educate our officers of how to deal with this issue. This is not unique to Kensington and Chelsea, but it's a matter of dealing with. And a final point, The thing you mentioned about Ukraine, we wish the Ukrainians well, and we hope that they will have a swift victory of the occupying forces that is absolutely devastating their home countries, and we wish the children of the Ukraine for the best that they can, and of all the families of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you very much, councillors, and thank you to the speakers.
Before we go to item 5, I want to remind councillors of a couple of points. First, we have 17 newly elected councillors, as well as 2 returning councillors. And I will give preference to a councillor who is making a maiden speech over a more long-serving councillor to ensure that a newly elected councillor can speak to a motion or issue. But I will not necessarily prioritise a newly elected councillor with regards to the order when I call people for a particular motion or issue. Second, just so that we are all aware, all contributions are made through the chair. If you talk to each other, I will ask that you redirect your approach and contribute through me as the chair. Third, please bear in mind that this meeting is recorded and choose your words carefully. Standing Order 25 lays out these points in more detail, and I'm going to read out again Standing Order 25, Spot 02, that states a councillor shall not indulge in tedious repetition, irrelevance, or unbecoming language, nor shall they impute motives to or make reflections of a personal character upon another councillor or councillors. Item 5. Do any members have petitions to present? In that case, can we go to item 6? I now invite the leader of the council to address the meeting for up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just over a week ago, communities across the borough came together to remember 72 loved ones who lost their lives 5 years ago in the Grenfell Tower tragedy. Nothing I can say tonight can begin to explain the emotions many would have felt on that day. A day filled with poignancy, sadness, and remembrance. Waking up on Tuesday morning, it was impossible not to think back to the 14th of June, 2017. Many people remarked to me that we had the same blue sky, a sky that provided such a sharp contrast to the awful events so many witnessed that day. Mr. Mayor, I personally felt huge sadness throughout last week. As a council, we think about Grenfell all the time, and it shapes what we do and the way we do it. But attending services and meeting people on the day of the anniversary, I also felt a true sense of community, a real togetherness. It was an honour to be invited to Westminster Abbey. Hearing the words from families and friends of the victims made me even more determined to make sure that the legacy of Grenfell shapes what we do and the way that we do it. The beautiful multi-faith service at the base of the tower, with tributes, children singing, everyone remembering. It was moving to see balloons being released one by one up the side of the tower, 18 in total, one by one, for every single child lost in the tragedy. Mr. Mayor, the community marked the occasion in so many different ways, with so much thought and care, and with so much hope for the future. The mosaics and the way that so many groups created something that fits so neatly together, a reflection of the community itself. The community kitchen stepping up to provide food and water. Dignitaries and politicians peripheral, with families right at the centre of everything. The respectful atmosphere around the tower and a willingness to listen to those speaking and to hear every word. It was like nothing I've experienced before, and was truly humbling. We've all had time to reflect on last week, and the one reflection that stays with me is the sense of dignity. bereaved and the survivors continue to show incredible strength, courage and solidarity as they search for truth and justice and for change. It's something I want this council to learn from. We learn from our communities just as we are led by them. Staff at the council, including those involved in supporting people in the aftermath, reflected and remembered together on Tuesday. They listened in silence to a child's poem and heard the words of bereaved and survivors. We held our own 72-second silence, as we have done tonight. I mention this only because this connection to the events of the 14th of June is important. It is important because we have been set a challenge by those most affected, a challenge to be the best council. Think how lucky we are to be given this second chance by people who lost everything, people who lost members of their own family and close friends, people who are committed to ensuring that something good comes from the terrible events of that night. As I said previously, our borough and our council will forever be synonymous with Grenfell. And my hope is that we can build a fitting legacy from the tragedy that means something to people and ensures that it's never forgotten. We are serious about taking on the challenge, about being the best council, but we recognise it will take effort and commitment from every part of our organisation. We must tackle the issues most important to people and not look inwardly, not tinker around the edges, but build houses and improve homes, tackle the cost of living, keep taxes low, create jobs and opportunities for people, build a strong and stable local economy, and meet net zero commitments. Mr. Mayor, the best council to me is a council that does these things, but it's also a council that cares about the people it serves and cares about the way in which it serves them. Thank you.
The Minority Party has sent her apologies and now invite Councillor Lowry to respond for up to 5 minutes.
Sure. This is Councillor Emmerdon-Code's speech, and I shall read it in the first person. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Lowry for reading my speech as I languish at home with COVID. I hope some of you who are vulnerable are wearing masks. We face terrible times with inflation above 9% and a frankly shocking cost of living crisis, which will make life all but impossible for 1 in 4 children. 1 in 4, Mr. Mayor, already struggling in poverty in the Royal Borough. In our poorer wards, this rises to over 40%. You will hear more balanced voices from the Labour group in the future, and I assure you they will be more apposite and timely than the tired formula that we will hear tonight. The triumvirate of supercars, bin collections and bashing Sadiq Khan as he struggles to keep London safe and moving despite continued fierce cuts from central government. I'm sure new Conservative councillors will give excellent maiden speeches tonight, but we have been there before, many, many times. The motion on Holland Park School, which we will be hearing later, cleverly avoids taking any formal position whatsoever, despite Councillor Rendell having a predisposition to favour a link with KAA. And the motion completely swerves the council's clear culpability for its appalling lack of judgment, a decision the current leader was responsible for in her former role as a cabinet member in spending the indefensible sum of nearly 100 million, the most expensive school in the Western Hemisphere, on a building that after 10 years is still riddled with snags. Not to mention the zero scrutiny of its disastrous outsourcing of the statutory responsibility for our children's education and welfare, which has gone so tragically and abominably wrong. And just yesterday, for many traumatised students at KAA, they were forced to witness what one attendee described as, quote, a criminal returning to the scene of the crime, unquote. Yes, David Cameron made a formal visit to pity sixth formers and applaud their resilience for an atrocity for which his government was personally responsible for. Many students were outraged at his visit. They had lost friends in the fire and yet had allegedly been ordered not to mention the G word in his presence. For the record, KAA was insulated with mineral wool. Digest that. These actions are the sad refrain of a council desperate to distract from the appalling inequality, which is worsening every day and has worsened before COVID, that shames the Royal Borough and its focus on its attractions, while councillors bleat about bin collections and supercars. How ironic that on the very same day that former PM Cameron visited the school just half a mile down the road, a fire broke out in Edward Wood's estate in Hammersmith and Fulham. It was very, very frightening, and some residents had to be treated for smoke inhalation. However, the fire behaved precisely as it should and was compartmentalised within one flat. Yes, Mr. Mayor, the block was refurbished in 2012 with rock wool mineral wool insulation, the same used at KAA, as a pilot project for which I attended the launch. 10 years ago, I gave the printed report on the project as a potential exemplar of good practice to former Councillor Rockfielding Mellon, who was then considering ways to refurbish Grenfell Tower. I believe a leaseholder in the tower did likewise. Both binned, of course, and many of our council tenants are still living in buildings that are not fire safe. After 5 years, this is shameful. So, Mr. Mayor, it's a summer of supercars, bin collections, and Sadiq bashing, versus the very real and challenging cost of living crisis that is dragging so many residents down into the vortex of debt, energy and rent arrears, despair and hunger. To counter this, the council praises itself for the scattering of what seems like royal Maundy money, which it so graciously hands out to people whose money it is. Please note, Mr. Mayor, the money that the council is so graciously scattering here and there, and from the coffers of the Royal Bank of KNC or from central government, is not the council's money. It is the people's money, which is being returned to them at a time of need, for which they should not have to beg. It does not merit self-congratulation from the council that has stood by whittering about bins and supercars, while those for whom they have statutory responsibility are impoverished. And it should not require their gratitude either. Mr. Mayor, the culture change so regularly claimed by this council is a fallacy. The Labour Group asks new Conservative councillors please to acknowledge this and press their leadership to understand that struggling families do not want pity and handouts. They do not want charity, they want equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry. Item 7. In accordance with standing orders, I rule that the order of business shall be as printed in the agenda. Item 8. Item 8, in brackets 1, urgent key decisions. These are submitted for information, and I ask the Council to note them. Item 9. No reports have been referred to Council from Council-side committees. Item 10. No reports have been referred to the Council by the scrutiny, by the select committees. Item 11. I've been notified of 3 questions to lead members. I first call on Councillor Verboven to ask a question to the Leader of the Council and for the Leader to respond.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask how RBKC is going to respond to the change in administration in Westminster and guarantee the continuation of services as we have a pre-existing bi-borough relationship with Westminster City Council, of which RBKC is a smaller partner, and therefore it does feel sometimes that we get unequal time dedicated to those shared services.
Thank you, Councillor Verboven. Well, we did do a review before the election of the bi-borough partnership, but independent people came in and looked at it and what we were both contributing towards it. I think that we both understand that a strategic alliance between both of us is really helpful for both boroughs. We have a good relationship with the new administration. I've met Councillor Hugg twice, and we'll be meeting him again bi-monthly. We'll have a bi-monthly meeting to iron out any issues there are, or see where we're going. And finally, we have no reason to think at the moment that there will be any changes. And I say that on the back of the fact that some of our bi-borough services really are exceptional. So we have excellent family and children's services. And I think it's fair to say that the Family and Children's Services by Borough are probably amongst the best in the country. We had an Ofsted in 2019. We've had an inspection coming back. We think it looks what the inspector's going to say is looking good. We're waiting to have the official report. And again, in adult social care, I've got here that, you know, that the care homes in RBKC are highly rated by CQC. We've got the best performing sexual health and substance misuse service. So there's a lot to play for. Our services are really good. And to put your mind at ease, we do regularly monitor what we're both paying in and whether it's equitable, etc. But I think we really would like to carry on by borough services. It seems to us that Westminster would too. So let's go on in that spirit. Thank you for your question.
Can I ask, Councillor Verboven, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, and really pleased to hear that, because indeed these services are incredibly important to our residents, because they're also the biggest part of our budget, etc. So really pleased to hear. We should look at potential situations if the relationship does change in the future. So if that relationship does break down, are there any strategies or guarantees in place that ensure the continuation of those hugely important services for our residents, so that none would be negatively impacted by that breakdown?
Right. As I said, I don't see a situation arising where that is likely to happen in the future. I mean, certainly from our point of view, we wouldn't want to withdraw from the borough. If our partners did, we'd have to see at the time. So let's wait and see. But we certainly have no intention.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Ali to ask a question to the lead member for Family Services and for the lead member to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to ask a question to the lead member for Family and Children, Councillor Catherine Fox. I understand and I appreciate you are new to the role, so perhaps you may not give all the details that we are asking, but please do your best to give us a clear answer. We, the Labour councillors of Kensington and Chelsea, teachers, union and stakeholders and the general community members of Kensington and Chelsea have written to the Secretary of State last week, and we have asked the Secretary of State for Education to halt the process of hostile takeover of our school, that's our much valued Holland Park Secondary School, and also to investigate the likelihood of conflict of interest between former board of governing body as well as the current, although they are no longer relevant because of the latest report of Ofsted, which charged the school as inadequate. We also have asked the Secretary of State to consider at this time, because of the situation now, is his at table, as his desk, to consider a new proposal or the old proposal from KAA, so that we, the Kensington and Chelsea residents, can keep wonderful community assets that Holland Park offers, and to keep our local school to the best possible standard that any school can offer in the whole country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ali, for your question. And the future of Holland Park School is of huge concern to all of us. So we absolutely share with you that we want the right result to come from this. So first of all, I just want to say that maybe the use of the term hostile takeover isn't quite appropriate at this moment. As we know, it's going through a process of which the Regional Schools Commission, which I'm going to talk about later, is actually looking at 3 different options for this school at the moment. So the option hasn't actually been decided. And I also want to assure you that we are also having conversations with the Secretary of State, the DFE, the Regional Schools Commission, and everybody else behind the scenes to make sure that we also make sure that they are fully aware of the option that KAA offers to us in this borough, and how we think that they would be the most appropriate local partner for this. But as I will talk about later, this is not a straightforward issue. There are a lot of nuances and a lot of maybe complications to come with this. And I also am very aware that there are now several judicial reviews that have now been put out and are in process. which are obviously something that are independent of us as a council, and they will have to take their course to see where we go with the judicial review. So I'm looking forward to the debate we're going to have later, where we can air more of these issues in more detail. But, you know, we are with you, and we absolutely recognise that the children at Holland Park School and their future and their education is at the centre of everything we do to secure stability at that school.
Councillor Ali, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. I would like, thank you for your response. And we would like to know the 3 different options that may be on the table, if you can give us a bit of details about that. And I have chosen my words clearly when I said hostile takeover. I would like you to know, to tell us, what would you frame, or how would you frame, if all other options have been rejected and only option that was United Learning? What else can you describe? Thank you.
Thank you for the supplementary question. So, as you probably know, now the process, because of the inadequate Ofsted report, sits with the Regional Schools Commission, and they are now looking at 3 different academy options. So there's KAA, there's Harris Academy, and there's United Learning. And all of them had to put submissions in by the end of last week. And at the moment, the Schools Commission is actually interviewing and talking to all 3 of the separate options. And as I've said, and I will repeat to say later when we have the debate, we have said that we recognise all the positives that come with the partnership with KAA, with the support of RBKC. But what we do have to recognise, and it's really important that you recognise, that it is not the Council's decision. This decision will come from the Regional Schools Commission, but it will have to be confirmed by the Secretary of State. And we will continue to have conversations with everybody in this arena.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Lowry to ask a question to the lead member for Grenfell Housing and Social Investment.
Right. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Why is the Council still refusing to demise control of windows to leaseholders on the Swimbrook estate, in spite of clear legal precedent, professional advice, and the opinion of the Council's own Planning Applications Committee, and by ignoring these formal requests for over 12 months, thereby preventing urgent and overdue works to tenants' windows to ensure residents are kept warm this winter and given the treatment they both deserve and are entitled to under the Council's tenant leaseholder charter?
Thank you, Councillor Lowry, for your question. So I'm afraid, Councillor Lowry, you're mistaken. We have not refused to consider requests from the leaseholders to be granted permission to apply to have their windows demised. Leaseholders on the Swimbrook estate represent 20% of the estate, and we've listened to them throughout this process. And we acknowledge that the impact of the council recovering the cost of the works, including the windows, on the estate will put them in a very difficult position. And we have put in place some very generous repayment plans that allow interest periods and, in some cases, repayment terms of up to 20 years. Conversations remain ongoing with these leaseholders, and officers and I have a meeting with them next week to look at the options. And we need to find a solution to this at this meeting, and we'll be discussing the possibility of demising responsibility for the windows to leaseholders, stressing under certain circumstances where it is safe to do so. But I need to be clear that as a freeholder, the council is responsible for the structure of the building, and this responsibility we've taken very seriously. This is an issue concerning the lease between the council and the leaseholders, and it doesn't lie within the remit of the planning committee, as you're now trying to suggest. Ensuring our buildings are safe and well maintained is paramount, and it should be noted that Councillor Lowry's request would inhibit our ability to achieve this. Other local authorities have not made concessions. Islington, for example, refuses to consider such requests. But this council is committed to listening to our residents, and it should be noted that we have carried out extensive consultation on this project. What we have heard overwhelmingly from our tenants is that they want high-quality UPVC windows, double-glazed, and they want them now. Working to block the installation of these windows undermines the trust between housing management and our tenants. And I'm very surprised to see Councillor Lowry advocating such a view, especially with non-resident leaseholders. But anyway, indeed, as Councillor Lowry seems to be seeking to undermine the views of our tenants, I thought it would be useful to read out an email I've received from a tenant on the Swimbrook estate within his ward. I have lived here for 15 years. Those 15 years have been a pain to live in a flat that does not support the heat because of the poor conditions the windows are in. More importantly, living costs are skyrocketing, and I cannot afford to pay any more for the gas and electricity. I know for a fact that these double glazing will make major changes to the warmth of my flat. It will save me a lot of money. These are wooden, single-glazed, rotten windows, and they're screaming to be replaced. So to conclude, I've always committed to putting our residents first and listening to their views. Where they have told us to change course, we've changed it. It's not a problem. And it's a shame to see that the issue of the Labour Party doing the opposite and prioritising the needs of leaseholders, many of which, as I say, do not even live on the estate, over the needs of our council tenants. It's all about listening to your residents.
You're wrong.
Councillor Lowry, if you would like to ask a follow-up question.
Yep, I have a follow-up question and statement to precede the question. Councillor Taylor-Smith, you are wrong. I'm here representing both tenants and leaseholders, which is why my question was about both tenants and leaseholders. Tenants are desperate for these works to get done immediately so that they're warm this winter. That was my question. And tenants agree that we need to solve the leasehold issue once and for all, because it's taken 12 months for you to acknowledge their requests for demisement. Tenants acknowledge that you need to resolve that issue for their works to proceed, and your answers failed to address that. The Planning Applications Committee refused the application for UPVC on the grounds that you actually have not solved this issue. So to be honest, tenants may not be warm this winter, and that's entirely your problem.
Is this a question, Councillor?
The question is, given the paucity of responses to the consultation which took place over COVID 2021, with a super minority of both tenants and leaseholders actually responding, only 9.5% of which wanted UPVC, how can you be satisfied that UPVC is the way forward given its toxicity? Tenants are desperate for works to go ahead, but what assurance can you give that the product will be safe? And I want to be clear once and for all, the tenants and leaseholders are in favour of my position, which is that you need to resolve their issue immediately so that the works can go ahead. So please do something about it.
So I think, thank you, Mr. I think there was a question in there. I mean, first of all, I think I just need to read you the question that you asked me when you say you're representing leaseholders and tenants. It concludes, why is the council still refusing to demise control of the windows to leaseholders on the Swimbrook estate in spite of clear legal precedent, professional advice and opinion of its own council's planning application? Okay, it's very clear it is a discussion about leaseholders. But anyway, let me carry on and answer your question. Let me
Councillor Lowry, not a helpful word to use. Councillor Lowry, if you use that word again, not yet, but you will not use that word again. It is wholly unacceptable. Do you hear that?
I hear
Do
that,
you hear that?
I hear that, Mr. Mayor, but he's misrepresented me.
Councillor Lowry, if you were in the House of Commons, they have a very clear procedure for MPs who accuse other MPs of lying. So please do not, and please apologise now.
I would like the member to
Can you
withdraw
please
his...
apologise?
I would like the member to withdraw his comment against me that I don't represent tenants on the estate, and thereby I will apologise as well.
Can you apologise now, please?
If the member withdraws his comment that I am not representing my own residents,
I'm sure he is. Councillor Lowry, can you please apologise for using that word?
It's not in the standing orders that I need to apologise. But I will do if he respects me with the same respect that I will give him. If he apologises, I will apologise.
I think, Councillor Lowry,
yeah.
I think you're on thin ice. Can you please apologise? I cannot force you to, but I'm asking you to.
Okay. I will apologise out of courtesy, but I also desire an apology for the very strong remark he made, which was completely uncalled for, which misrepresented my question and assumed that I don't represent 80% of the residents on the estate, which is what he insinuated, and I found that very offensive. It's untrue. It's completely untrue.
Councillor Lowry, I wonder if you could apologise, and let's move on to Councillor Taylor-Smith's continued answer. But if not, I think we move on.
Councillor
Can you,
Taylor-Smith,
can
I
you
would
please
appreciate it if you could.
apologise briefly now?
I just did apologise.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I apologise
Thank
for the
you.
mark, and I also wish for Councillor Taylor-Smith to apologise as a courtesy, given he started it. I asked a very polite question.
Of course. Thank you.
Item 12. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11?
So I was answering his question, actually.
I think, Councillor Taylor-Smith, you've missed the boat. You've missed the boat,
playground.
Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Councillor
Taylor-Smith.
Thank you.
You've missed the boat.
Sorry, I was answering his question.
I offered you the chance, and then I started on
fair
item
enough.
12.
I'm very happy to write a response
But I think
on the second supplementary question with regard to the ridiculous suggestion that UPVC windows are inflammable.
I think that would be a very good outcome. Thank you.
Just get on with the works and keep
Can
them
we
warm.
move on to item 12? Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for 2 minutes? Councillor Tim Verboven has indicated his wish to speak.
I would like to draw the attention of the Council to the 6-week consultation by TfL on the withdrawal and alteration of a large number of bus services. For Kensington and Chelsea, we're looking at the withdrawal of bus routes 414, 14, 72, 74, N74 and C3 and alterations to bus routes 328, 19, 430, 49, N27 and 27. We're caught in a trap while central government and City Hall continue to battle it out. Local residents and businesses will be the losers. Bus reductions are the result of the government's refusal to support TfL with long-term and sustainable funding. As part of the government bailouts of TfL during the pandemic, TfL is required to make 400 million in savings, an impossible task. The withdrawal of bus routes will have a significant impact on local residents in just as a master planning begins for the Oscourt site, the largest development site in Zone 1. We cannot risk reduced bus services whilst welcoming thousands of new residents into our community. Additionally, a reduction in bus services will hit the vulnerable in our communities hardest. It means more people will struggle to get to hospitals that are best reached by bus, such as Chelsea and Westminster, Brompton and Marsden hospitals. And it means people in lower incomes already struggling because of the cost of living crisis will need more time to travel as they are very dependent on bus services. Furthermore, with both TfL and the government promoting more active travel, we need more, not fewer travel options to encourage people to leave their cars at home. Fewer buses means reduced access to transport for those who are retired and increased fares for commuters. These cuts to bus services will put additional pressures on our tube stations and more cars on our roads. Together with the borough's lack of safe cycling network, this will only worsen our already unacceptable poor air quality. So we would be very keen to hear what this council and also our MP Felicity Buchan are doing to campaign and support a continuation of these vital links. Thank you.
Councillor Verboven, thank you. And congratulations on your maiden speech. Councillor Mary Wheel has indicated her wish to speak. Councillor Wheel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise on behalf of the residents of Brompton and Handstown, and also, I hope colleagues don't mind, adjacent wards, to deplore the planning appeal launched by TfL and Native Land on South Kensington Station. Our planning committee very firmly and rightly turned down this application, which fails to respect the architectural and historic nature of the site. They did so really on a sea of broken promises, having residents and council having spent countless hours back in 2015-2016 developing a perfectly good planning brief, which they then absolutely rode roughshod over. Thousands of residents, nearly 2,500, objected to that planning application, and tens of thousands of residents' hours were spent opposing this dreadful application, and in concert with the council. I mean, the amount of resource and time and passion residents put into opposing this, that they then have the front to come and appeal this decision, I think is disgraceful. It is, of course, their right. But I hope that we as a council are going to strain every single sinew, deploy every talent and tactic within this council to face off this appeal and keep this dreadful overdevelopment at bay.
Thank you, Councillor Wheel. Councillor Toby Benton has indicated his wish to speak.
Thank you. First off, thanks for all your boos. It's very informative. Fortunately, I've had constituents from my ward turn up here today, and this is what I want to speak about in the time I've been given. So, what's happened, what I've seen as a newcomer, and somebody who's had a little bit of experience with sort of local campaigning and whatnot, the council has formed on this kind of thing. There's been a subgroup formed that residents don't know about. There seems to have been the very bare minimum of real effort to actually engage residents. Right? There has been along the way all kinds of compromises offered by the residents that do know about it, which have been completely ignored. There's been a mystery donor who's throwing money apparently at this project, and the council won't tell residents who it is. So who has a stake in this and why? This is completely opaque. Now,
can you be quiet, please, Conservative councillors? It is a maiden speech, and we do not talk or make sounds during maiden speeches. Carry on, please, Councillor Benton.
Thank you. So, and like I say, the council has formed on this post-Grenfell. We've heard all kinds of things. Like I say, I'm a council tenant, stone's throw from the site. And we've heard all kinds of flowery promises about how residents are going to be at the centre of it, while the reality has been quite the opposite. We've had top-down decisions and a sort of patina of democracy spread over this railroaded sort of process. Decisions are always made on our behalf. In what seems to me to amount to a sort of grotesque virtue signalling. I would just like to make the point that I think we need to completely overhaul this process of consultation. The first thing anybody should be doing in these sets of circumstances is taking a blank piece of paper and giving it to the residents. What do you want? Instead, what we have is choices which are completely siloed, things that, do you want X or Y? But these things need to start with residents. And this is just not the experience that we've been having. Where they don't have bodies that can actually influence council processes, they need to be empowered to form those bodies. And we need to answer to them. Thank you.
Councillor Benton, congratulations on your maiden speech. Members will see that we have 6 motions printed on the agenda. I note that Councillor Wade has sent her apologies, so we will move straight to the second motion on Holland Park School. Motion 2 is the subject of Holland Park School, and I call upon Councillor Josh Rendell formally to move the motion standing in his name, and Councillor Pretty Hudd to second.
I move, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I begin this motion tonight, I'd just like to thank the obviously residents, parents, members across this chamber, and our MP, who has done so much to get this issue raised up the agenda. This issue, of course, has been a trying time for everyone, even residents who don't send their children to the school. There has been a decline in student behaviour. We have teachers going on strike. We have numerous judicial reviews and a governing board that was not listening to the community that it serves. This has been a very challenging case, and I must say one of the most stressful of my political career. The school under the previous administration also had its challenges. The council did not have a good relationship with the school prior to the previous board resigning, and this was evident through unresolved issues through the building and access to grounds, as I know Councillor Lowry raised earlier. The council was concerned about the bullying allegations and harassment that came up in the news this time last year, and we did take steps to address that. As Holland Park is an academy and not a maintained school, we had no real jurisdiction and no real local governors on board, and so we asked the DFE for assistance. I have met former pupils of the school from the student collective and heard their stories of bullying and harassment. And clearly, something needs to be done to address this. The council commissioned an independent safeguarding review to look into this. The school initially appointed, the DFE initially appointed new trustees to the school, and we had hoped the discussion was move away to a more positive relationship. From the beginning, when the ESFA, who kind of funds academies, put forward a notice to improve, we hoped a local solution would be considered to give serious consideration given the outstanding nature of many of our schools and our council services, such as our SEND and our children's services. However, what we found was the school did not engage, and we felt that was not in line with our expectations or indeed our residents' expectations. This first came to pass when myself and our Director of Education attended a parents' collective meeting in Notting Hill Church. Not one member of the school attended, nor not a single trustee. This was not in line with our expectation. Post-Grenfell, this community and this council wants to reach and consult and belong to the whole community and bring us everyone with them. The school did not do that. Also disappointing, there was no new trustees on the board and no one that really understood our borough, especially post-Grenfell. What we did, Mr. Mayor, was continually push a local option. And of course, we welcomed bids from all multi-academy trusts, but we believed that a local option was the best for our community. However, we felt the views of our community, the council, and other stakeholders were not being seriously considered despite the strength of community feeling. I now turn, Mr. Mayor, to the motion as amended. Firstly, with officers, members of this chamber, I'd like to thank you for your support, but I'd also like to say, Mr. Mayor, that this was a great example of cross-party working relationship. Councillor Ali and Councillor Dent-Code were actually very, very helpful on this. I know Councillor Ali is a parent and Councillor Dent-Code as well. We had numerous meetings together to really kind of form a consensus of how this issue should be sorted. As Councillor Folkes earlier said in her response, we don't obviously have ultimate jurisdiction over Holland Park School, but this is something that we really, really wanted to ensure that our community was really listened to and that those children that go there get the best education as possible. When we put the motion in as initially drafted, we did not know where we would be in 6 weeks' time and hoped the conversation would have moved on. Perhaps KA would have been considered and put forward. The recommendation at this stage when the motion was written, the governing board had not made that recommendation, nor was the Ofsted report out. This is the reason why it's drafted. As such, that is why, Mr. Mayor, we're going to accept Labour's motion this evening on Holland Park School. Nonetheless, we need to move forward and work with the new chair and forge a good working relationship. We have phenomenal relationships with all our schools and have no doubt Holland Park can be the same, if not stronger. What I do implore, Mr. Mayor, and I think hopefully consensus across this chamber, is that the motion as amended is accepted, the school listens to our local community, listens to their local option, and gets the best possible solution for our students and our parents who also send their children there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rendell. Councillor Hudd, do you wish to speak at this point?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Council and members of the general public. I would like to second Councillor Josh Rendell's motion. Before I continue, may I please take this opportunity to thank the residents of Camden Ward for electing me to represent them. I feel very privileged and humbled to be elected. I'm also very grateful to be working with my two brilliant colleagues, Councillor Catherine Folkes and Councillor Lloyd North. We are all very committed to be working together for all the residents of Camden Ward. Finally, I would like to pay tribute to my two predecessors, Robert Freeman and Ian Wason. They were both outstanding and committed representatives for our ward, and I have big boots to fill. I cannot thank them both enough for their guidance and for making time to share their extensive knowledge with me. I have lived in Camden Ward for 30 years over more than half my life. Before becoming a councillor, I was a very active volunteer in the borough, including as a part of a mentoring scheme at Holland Park School for over 5 years. I am therefore particularly pleased to second this motion, welcoming the change in the leadership at the school and looking forward to working with the new leadership to start addressing their concerns. Since it opened in 1958, Holland Park School has always been a superb community asset, despite its somewhat cyclical performance, with periods of outstanding excellence followed by periods of obvious weaknesses. It has many notable alumni, including actors such as Angelica Houston, musicians such as Yaz, comedians such as Omid Jalali, politicians such as Nadim Zahawi and Hilary Benn, and designers such as Tom Dixon, my favorite. It had also had some notable members of staff, including Brian Ferry and Barnaby Lennon. Most of all, most of you will be aware of the publicity surrounding the school's recent problems. Given the school's distinguished history, it is dismaying that the school has been downgraded by Ofsted from outstanding in 2014 to inadequate in 2022. There has been disruptive behavior within and outside the school by the children, and the teachers have been on strike. I remember well the controversy around the school's decision to sell the football pitches, which are now the site of Academy Gardens, a block of luxury residential flats. The proceeds of the sale paid for the new state-of-the-art building with its superb facilities, including swimming pool, tennis courts, and football pitches. That said, it saddens me that school to date has not been at all cooperative in sharing its outstanding amenities with the local residents, as other schools do throughout the country. It has been asked to do so this on many occasions, and it is even part of the academy lease agreement with the council. Obviously, such arrangements cannot interfere with the operation of the school, but it is particularly disappointing that when the school breaks for the full 6 weeks of its summer holidays, it is entirely shut, and nothing is available to the local residents. I hope that this is taken on board by the new head and board of governors. There could certainly be more community engagement with at least one governor representing RBKC. To summarize, Holland Park School is one of the great institutions of this borough. I hope we can all work together with cross-party support and to do our best to help Holland Park School regain its once excellence flagship status. Many thanks.
Congratulations, Councillor Hudd, on your maiden speech. Members will be aware from what Councillor Rendell has said and will see that an amendment has been submitted. I now call upon Councillor Ahmed to propose the amendment and Councillor Ali to second. So I now invite Councillor Ahmed to speak. Sorry, carry on.
I propose.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
I now invite Councillor Ahmed to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for accepting the amendment. It makes things a lot easier. I can sit down, but I think I'd just like to use the opportunity to just to feed back about a meeting that, and to speak for the parents and the teachers that I met with about 2 weeks ago, together with Councillor Ali, Councillor Thaxter and Councillor Emmerdent Code. This was about 2 weeks ago. We met with them during their industrial dispute. And I think looking at the motion, it's absolutely right that the council has concerns about the safety and education in Holland Park. However, as mentioned earlier, the motion manages to evade addressing the root cause of those concerns. And the root cause is described by the staff and the parents, who tell us that the problems are down to the actions of a failing governing body and the absence of any real leadership. The governing body has overseen the downgrading of the school from outstanding to inadequate, whilst simultaneously attempting to facilitate what the parents have called, these are their words, a covert takeover of the school by a multi-academy trust known as United Learning. And there's significant concern especially regarding the lack of transparency and the absence of any consultation regarding their decision to have Holland Park absorbed by United Learning. United Learning has absolutely no links whatsoever with the local community. It's known for its punitive and outdated behavioural policies, prescriptive one-size-fits-all curriculums, and the lack of democracy and accountability that accompanies running what should be a public service as a business that's been outsourced. United Learning also has the highest reported incidence of racism of any academy trust in the country, so we can have absolutely no confidence that they could meet the needs of a very proudly diverse community like Kensington. And this lack of due process regarding the consultation is currently the subject of a judicial review, and also the poor quality of the communication by the governing body has caused significant disruption for pupils. The governing body's failure to consult with teachers or to respond to teachers' repeated requests to meet meant that it ultimately forced staff to resort to industrial action, which is having a very significant impact on pupils during crucial exam time. And I think staff and parents have consistently expressed concerns that this governing body, many of whom, it's worth noting, have held CEO positions in other academy trusts, have instigated this managed decline of the school to paint it as failing and in urgent need of rescue, whilst at the same time framing the takeover by United Learning as the only viable option. Even now, governors are continuing to ignore due process, and they've failed to enact any of the special remedial measures in response to the recent, and it has to be said, very conveniently timed inadequate rating from Ofsted. And they're not willing to offer any solutions to the problems in Holland Park other than the absorption by United Learning. So what we're seeing is a desire to kind of expedite this process of the takeover with no regard given to the wishes of teachers or parents or the local community. And if those on the governing body don't believe that they have the capacity or the skills to deliver immediately on those remedial measures, or they're just unwilling to do so, then they just need to resign and allow new trustees to act in the interests of the school and the local community. So I think we would welcome a swift change in the leadership of the school, as well as a process of consultation to guide the direction that the school takes. And it's really important that all avenues for the future control of Holland Park are explored before any kind of irreversible decision to convert it to a multi-academy trust is made. And that has to include consideration of Holland Park either becoming a single academy trust or merging with Kensington Aldridge Academy. These are two options which staff and the local community have consistently expressed as the preferred option. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Ali, do you wish to speak at this point?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll make it short. I wish to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for cooling down the situation we had just moments ago. And I'd also like to welcome all new members of this council. It's a privilege to be elected for me second time. Yeah. And I wish to say, what you have just experienced is the heat of the moment, nothing beyond this chamber. So do not be fooled, but do think we hate each other. We work with each other and we have to work with each other. And this motion is a clear direction of how this council will work and should work when we have all of us heading in the right direction for the sake of our community. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now that we've exchanged apologies, I think we move on and never go back to that point. So thank you. Thank you. We've moved on. Of course, he will in writing, hopefully. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may say, once again, I wish to thank Councillor Josh Rundle for his leadership when he was leading the department, and he's done an amazing job. It's not easy for an opposition councillor to acknowledge others publicly, but I must say it's been great to work with you on this issue, and I thank you for your leadership of what you have done. And I acknowledge, and most of the community have acknowledged, and we Labour councillors do acknowledge when others have succeeded and did the right thing, and it's only fair to do that. And I hope that will be encouragement for others to work with us when we have to work with each other. Yeah. How we get here, Mr. Mayor, there's a really good point. A couple of weeks ago, I have been, as my fellow councillor, newly elected councillor, Dr. Councillor Ahmed has mentioned, we have been with teachers, and we have been around the school, and the situation was personal to me. Why? I had my son at home while I was at the picket line supporting the teachers who have been there striking. Why? The Board of Governance has not listened. They have not listened. They've ignored completely. And this is an ongoing issue. I think that we as a council should get involved and make sure the new leadership listens to the teachers. Holland Park, it is what it is. It has been what it is because of the excellent teachers that have been providing the service for our people. And I think it's an issue that we have to work. And if we can get it done tonight, I hope my son will go back to school tomorrow, rather than looking after him at home all the time, or asking him to come back to do with few things that I not have time for. But thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the point that we would like to work. Now that we have agreed together on this motion, the next chapter for us is to ask the new Board of Governance to governing body to allow more parent councillors. Most of the decisions has been made without consultation or even acknowledgement. The most stakeholders of the council, of the school, which are the parents who give their time, their lifetime, to bring their children up and to do the best they can. And if you do not consult parents about their children, it's a recipe for failure. And I would like to see the new governing body to include more, not just two parent governors, but more parent governors, as well as the situation what it is. I would also like to see councillors from RBKC to be part of the governing body. We can choose or select among us, and I think it will be good to have councillors that can report back to us. We will never want to see again in a school, an outstanding school, all this time, 5% exam results for the whole country, top 5%, to be charged and by inadequate. This is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable anywhere in the country, and certainly not acceptable in Kensington and Chelsea that we value so much. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I would like to conclude this point now. We're here now. Still 1 minute to go. I'm keeping eye on the time on the watch. Yes, I said I'm going to finish quickly, so apologies for that, but I will finish on time. Yesterday, we had a long walk from the school via Notting Hill all the way to Westminster, and all the way to the Department for Education to hand over a hand-delivered message from the parents, from governors, from governing parents, from teachers, from concerned members of our community to the Secretary of State. And I hope the Secretary of State will listen to the wider community and give the right and make the right decision about our school. We all want to succeed, and we all want Holland Park to succeed. I'm sad to say that my second child, I did not allow him to go Holland Park. Why? Because I expected this was to happen, but it's going to KAA, which is, I believe, is much better. So I would like to see in the future both Holland Park and KAA working together and forming a great, resilient, great, successful community for our children and for future generation, and hopefully some of them to come here after us and lead this council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well done.
Councillor Ali, thank you. I now wish to open up to debate this motion. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? I know that Councillor Folkes does, and she will, as lead member, respond, but is there anybody else? Councillor Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't planning to speak, but some of you will know that many moons ago I was responsible for the school's portfolio, and I am still a governor of Kensington Aldridge Academy. This is actually it's really good to see the way that people are agreeing about the subject, because the most important thing, which people have said here, is the children, and that they get the best education possible. And it has been a really depressing spectacle seeing a fantastic school fall apart, and kids, when they're doing exams, not being able to go to school, teachers on strike. This should not happen. So I'm really pleased to see that we are all, I think, on one on this subject, that we need to do whatever we can to support the school, get it back on track. Obviously, I have a personal interest in KAA. If that's the solution, fantastic. But whatever comes next, and we have been, and Councillor Rendell has been very active, that we continue to just make sure that our children get the best education. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask Councillor Folkes, does any other councillor wish to speak? Catch my eye. The answer is no. Councillor Folkes, as the lead member, would you please now respond to the debate for up to 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Councillor Hudd on her excellent maiden speech, and to also congratulate Councillor Bowen, Councillor Benton and Councillor Ahmed on your maiden speeches, and welcome you all to the Chamber. It's fantastic to have new councillors and new blood and energy in this Chamber. I'd also like to very much thank Councillor Ali and Councillor Ahmed for your speeches on Holland Park School. It's great that we all come from exactly the same place, that we're working on this together, and we have the same focus on where we want to see this going. So obviously a lot of what I've written has already been said before, so I'll try and sort of edit it while I'm standing up. But I think what we've all mentioned here is that it was, already previously, before even all this started, there were issues at Holland Park School to do with the bullying, which is where we got to where we are with the Board of Governors there have been taken away and a new board put in. But what I have found personally just really bizarre about it was there was almost like some subconscious decision from the new board to adopt the previous defensive and closed culture that was already there in the school. And that was just a sort of really odd thing that seems to have happened. And as you've all been making the point, the inadequate Ofsted report is actually just such a betrayal of everything that this school has stood for, and a betrayal to the teachers, to the children, to the parents, and actually for all of us who, as Councillor Hudd has said, this is a flagship, a really prestigious institution in our borough, and we do not want to see it failing. So I know the new governors have been working hard to try and get to grips with the problems and to try and develop actions and a plan to tackle these. And I think I have to acknowledge that they have worked very hard, and it has been very difficult for them as well. But unfortunately, the transition to the new governing board just got off to a really bad start, because they just didn't simply understand the community that they're working with. This is a community still deeply traumatised by the Grenfell fire tragedy, and who still feel excluded and angry. And instead of any empathy, instead of listening to them, there seemed to be this closed loop that was already predetermining this decision to go with a large mat. And it doesn't surprise me that that caused divisions, it caused anger, and really has just set in train this entrenched, polarised situation that we're in, and really caused a toxic relationship with the stakeholders that we've all been talking about this evening, and how they're going to proceed on a different track. And during the last 9 months, there have been numerous missed opportunities. As we know, one of them was in February immediately dismissing the idea of KAA forming a match with RBKC support. And it was a real shame that that was dismissed so early, because it actually has put them really far behind developing all the ideas that they wanted to have to work alongside and work with the governors and work with the DFE and the Secretary of State and the Schools Commissioning Service. And it's a real, I think it's heartbreaking that there was no honest and open engagement with stakeholders or willing to seriously listen to any of us, actually, whether it was the local authority, the teachers, or the parents, that everyone was closed and they couldn't hear that we were saying, you need to listen to your community or you're not going to get anywhere further with this. And I think that's a tragedy.
And that's a good place to stop, Councillor Folkes.
Oh, can I just say one last thing?
If it's one sentence, yes, but no more.
I just want to say, as I've said before, where the process is going, because I think that is just really important.
No, I think, Councillor Folks, thank you.
Okay.
I now invite Councillor Ahmed to respond to the debate for up to 5 minutes.
This could be very brief, actually. I just wanted to thank Councillor Emma Dent-Code and also Councillor Ali for their work on this with me. And it's heartening to hear that we're all moving in similar direction. I think the crucial point is that whatever direction the school takes needs to be guided by the local community and by the teachers who thus far have felt completely sidelined and dismissed. It's no small thing to decide to take industrial action, especially during exam time, and speaking to the teachers, it's actually caused an enormous addition to their workload to be able to support the students, in addition to working on this campaign. So I think I welcome the direction that you're speaking about, and there does need to be a recognition that academisation is not necessarily the way forward. And we do need to see evidence. We need to see evidence that academisation is in the interests of schools and of students and of teachers. Because by and large, all that we see is de-skilling of teachers, reduction in special educational needs support, and actually really inflexible decision-making, which is not in the interests of staff or students. You know, teachers are highly skilled, they know what they're doing to support young people, and actually we need to have a bit more faith and respect for them to be able to make these decisions. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. I now invite Councillor Rendell to respond to the debate for up to 5 minutes. He's allowed up to 5 minutes. He doesn't need to use all of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Folks, for this very unorthodox way of doing things. The decision now lies with the Regional Schools Commission, who have undertaken submission for 3 prospective MAP partners: KA, Harris Academy, and United Learning, as we said earlier. Obviously, we believe local knowledge and overarching interest is the best interest of our children and parents at heart, but we are not blind to the fact that capacity to do this will be hugely challenging. We asked the RSC and the DfE to consider that so-called experts and a bigger and better approach is not necessarily the right formula for Holland Park School. Of course, I don't have to say this necessarily, but KA generally understands trauma. They generally understand how a community can suffer, and they have great expertise, especially David Benson, on that and the leadership of KAA. And Matt would... yeah, I think we said it. But thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's where we are, and I'd like to, again, thank all colleagues across the Chamber for their support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. I now put the amendment to the vote. Would all those for the amendment please show? Would those against the amendment please show? Are there any abstentions? In that case, I declare the amendment carried. I now put the motion as amended to the vote. Would those for the motion as amended please show? Would those against the motion as amended please show? Are there any abstentions? I declare the motion as amended carried unanimously. Motion 3 is on the subject of acoustic camera on red routes. I call upon Councillor Sarah Addenbrook formally to move the motion standing in her name, and Councillor Lucy Knight to second.
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Addenbrook, do you want to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And firstly, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Verboven, Benton, Hudd, Ahmed on their excellent maiden speeches, and I apologise if I've forgotten somebody. Mr. Mayor, residents and colleagues requested we bring this motion to Council this evening
as Mayor Khan and TfL's inaction is causing more and more misery for our residents. For some, it has had a real impact on their health and well-being and will continue to have an impact if nothing is done now. This council was the first council in the country to trial acoustic cameras, and I would like to thank my colleagues, Councillor Thalasitis and McVeigh, for all they did to make this happen in Knightsbridge. Mr. Mayor, I am sure you will remember that following the success of the trial and consultation with residents, the council expanded the noisy PSPO in November to cover the whole borough. Good news, we all thought. However, the bad news is the installation of additional cameras has stalled completely on red routes. Officers have spent the last 7 months negotiating with TfL to get the cameras mounted, but the goalposts just keep changing. One excuse given is, we might scratch the paint on your lampposts. I mean, really? Absolutely no concern for the health and well-being of our residents. The problem is not just with supercars, but cars and motorbikes that have been intentionally modified to make as much noise as possible. Some nights, convoys head down from the A40 and then race around the borough, disturbing the residents late at night. Residents are frankly fed up and do not understand why Mayor Khan is not supporting them. They know we have purchased the cameras they request through the ward ENSIL and just want them installed without any further delay so they can get a good night's sleep. The success of the pilot in Knightsbridge resulted in several hundred fines and no repeat offenders. So I ask you all to support this motion and send a clear message to Mayor Khan that we need action now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Addenbrooke, thank you. Councillor Knight, do you wish to speak at this point?
Yes, please. I just want to say well done to everyone on their maiden speeches today, because you've made it a bit less nerve-wracking. I'm honoured and humbled to have been elected to represent Holland Ward in this borough, and I want to thank each and every one of the residents that has supported me. I look forward to working hard for all my constituents and their needs over the coming 4 years. I want to start by paying tribute to Councillor Charles O'Connor, who made a great contribution throughout his time on the council. He played a key role in the planning committee, but he will be remembered in Holland in particular for his 70-plus resident lunches he introduced. They've been a wonderful way of bringing residents across Holland together, particularly for those who find themselves living alone, and especially after the 2 years of lockdowns and shielding many of them have endured. I'm delighted to be taking these over from him, and I hope we can bring even more residents in Holland together so they can meet more of their surrounding neighbours and form friendships close to home. I also want to pay tribute to Councillors Arieti and Thalasitis, who have worked tirelessly hard for the residents of Holland Ward over the last 4 years, and this couldn't have been made more clear to me than on the doorstep throughout the campaign. They've taught me so much already, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm now also privileged to call them both good friends. I'm so looking forward to working hard alongside them as a team for our residents going forward. I've grown up in this borough, as my parents are based down in Chelsea, but I moved to Ladbroke Grove over 4 years ago, and this is very much now my home. I'm particularly passionate, Mr. Mayor, about the health and mental well-being of all our residents. And that is why I'm so pleased to be serving on the Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee as Vice Chairman alongside Councillor Addenbrooke. I also look forward to being part of the Licensing Committee that has worked so hard to make Kensington Chelsea the vibrant alfresco hub that it is today. Mr. Mayor, we are here tonight to discuss acoustic cameras, and I should say this was one of the biggest issues that came up on the doorstep from our residents throughout the recent election campaign, as so many of them are disturbed day and night by loud motorists and often racing cars on Holland Road and its surrounding streets. One of our main pledges to our residents was to deliver acoustic cameras on Holland Road, and we don't want to let them down on this. And I hope you can all agree with us here tonight that no resident in this borough deserves to have their sleep deprived by loud vehicles. This is why we have brought this important motion to you today, Mr. Mayor, as unfortunately the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has dragged his feet on delivering these cameras, and we would like to see them operating on the red routes he manages in RBKC as soon as possible. Therefore, it is absolutely critical that we draw cross-party support on this matter tonight. And I believe this issue does not need to be one that is political. And it is something all Labour, Conservatives and Liberal Democrats alike can get behind for the benefit of all of our community. My colleagues have been at the forefront of trialling acoustic cameras over the past 4 years, with Councillor Thalisitis introducing the first acoustic camera in the country in Knightsbridge, which has been a huge success. There have been several hundred fines issued and 0 repeat offenders. And so I commend this motion to the Chamber tonight, Mr. Mayor. I strongly support acoustic cameras in problem locations, especially on Holland Road, and I look forward to hearing the rest of this debate.
Councillor Knight, congratulations on your maiden speech. I now wish to open this motion up to debate, and the following councillors have indicated they wish to speak. Councillor Mackover, Councillor McVeigh, Councillor Aretti, Councillor Lane and Councillor Thalasitis. Are there any others at this stage whose names I have not mentioned? Okay. Noted, Councillor. But can you please be suitably brief? Councillor Mackover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to support this motion on behalf of my ward, Queensgate, my home of some 30 years. I want to thank the residents of Queensgate for their support, and for 2 ward residents in particular, Councillor Lane and Councillor Whedon-Sands, my excellent colleagues. I also want to pay tribute to my Queensgate predecessors, Max Chowan, Maxwell Woodger and Matthew Palmer, who all contribute and may continue to contribute, or contributed in their own unique ways. We remember everything. Congratulations also to all the other excellent maiden speeches tonight. This is a really good, high quality welcome to council work. On the subject of the motion, I look at this as this initiative as an excellent example of, in the borough, of finding a fair, proportionate and efficient solution to the problem of road racing, which has caused much late-night disturbance to our residents on both red routes and other roads as well. Queensgate, the street, is actually 1 mile long, 100 feet wide, covers 3 RBKC wards, and a little bit of it in another council as well, has some excellent listed buildings, and borders some of the world's greatest museums and universities. Unfortunately, for those drivers participating in late-night racing, they may not be able fully to appreciate the Queensgate's benefits. We're actually very grateful as ward residents to the Met Police Specialist Roads Unit when they have been able to arrange interventions with multiple officers. In a recent operation, they were able to hold back nearly 100 cars, which was in a very big race meeting, and they, blocking them in, they found that there were a number of fines and confiscations issued both for defective vehicles and uninsured drivers. But we recognise that we can't always have major police operations on this, and on these streets these incidents happen without warning and very late at night as well. And that's why local residents associations have continued to ask us, people on the doorsteps as well, to see if we can produce an acoustic camera. So well done to the council for providing the infrastructure and the incentive, and we're looking forward to the success of a NSIL bid, and that's why we local residents will join everybody here, hopefully, in welcoming this motion.
Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to all the councillors on your maiden speeches. Councillor Benton, Verhoeven, Hub, getting there, Ahmed, Lucy Knight and Mackover. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for Councillor Albert for bringing this motion. We've had many debates in this chamber about noisy cars. I refuse to call them supercars because they are nothing super about them. But it's really wonderful to actually be here now talking about something that has been a positive. That we've been the very, very first council in the entire UK to get these on our streets. We were told it couldn't be done. We were told, yes, of course, the technology is there, but the law is not there. So we had fantastic officers who looked at our public spaces protection order, and that gave us the mechanism. So we are really, really a can-do council, and it is wonderful that we have this. It's such a shame that TfL is slightly less can-do, to put it politely. And you know, all the other wards now have this option to have this. It's coming to the north too. It is everywhere. And we've been trying to get one on Brompton Road, and we've now had to kind of move it and put it in a much less effective place because we can't get the traction with TfL. So that's all I want to say about it, really. And I just want to say we really did do it in true Conservative fashion. We went out to a small independent business who was just trialling them, just making them down in Southampton. They literally had 2 ready to go, and we had them and we put them on our streets. So it's a really, really, really good news story, and I'm going to keep on going on about it because it is a success. And noise, no matter where it comes from, is bad. We heard from residents earlier. Noise affects people. No one wants to be woken up in the night with noise. These are literally like a jet taking off in your bedroom. So we are all united about how we need to do something, and let's just urge TfL to work with us on some of our worst streets in our borough, which are TfL roads. So great motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. Councillor Aretti, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, may I congratulate my colleague, my ward colleague, Councillor Knight, and welcome her to the chamber. Congratulations on the maiden speech. May I also congratulate all the other councillors who had the maiden speeches, Councillor Ahmed, Hudd, Verboen, Benton and McCall. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, may I thank Councillor Addenbrook and Councillor Knapp for bringing forward this motion, and I completely echo and share their opinion on why these acoustic cameras are very important for our borough. Sadly, 4 years ago, Mr. Mayor, me and Councillor Thalasitis campaigned similar to acoustic cameras on Russell Road, and we could make a huge difference by installing the speed bumps. But sadly, this is under TfL red route. The speed bumps can't be managed because it's a red route, and also it's managed by TfL. Some sad stories on Holland Road, Mr. Mayor. You know, I've spoken to many residents. You're looking at newly born babies, infants, waking up in the night because of huge sound from the motorbikes, a huge noise from speeding race cars, and elderly ladies who couldn't sleep at night, sleep deprivation, and also I've heard stories about people suffering from insomnia. So there's one great example where a family spends 3 nights on Holland Road and goes to their parents' home in Hertfordshire just to escape from the noise from Holland Road. So I think, may I request the new Labour group under new management lobby your own Labour mayor to focus on issues on Holland Road rather than focusing on I know you've got your own budgeting issues, covering up your budgets during the pandemic, but also try and focus on the issues that... And let me tell you something. You've got the majority of the vote share on Holland Road, so I could help you out with your PR agency. I could help Mayor Sadiq Khan's PR by retweeting or investing my own money. If you could successfully manage to install the cameras, I would be very grateful. Let me tell you something, I'll help you with your vote shares. So, but Mr. Mayor, I think this is fundamentally important. This is our biggest issue, not across Holland Road, but other areas as mentioned in the motion. But I'm only speaking on behalf of Holland Ward residents because I've got more exposure to the area. So just winding up saying, I wish this time, we've been requesting the London Mayor for 4 years, Mr. Mayor, every month on and on and on. And I understand my fellow colleague, Councillor Thalasitis, have worked day and night speaking to residents, signing up a petition, going across the borough. So final request to London Mayor, on also the Labour group under new management, to lobby the Mayor and help us to install the cameras. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Aretti. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'm very grateful to the electors of Queen's Gate for the trust that they have placed in me in electing me. Secondly, I'm very grateful to my two ward colleagues, Councillor McAver, Councillor Whedon-Sands, for all of their support during the campaign. Thirdly, and Councillor McAver has already paid tribute to our predecessors, but I'd like to pay particular tribute to Councillor Chauhan. Max was the one who encouraged me to stand as a councillor. He provided great counsel and support throughout the whole of the campaign, and I really wouldn't be here without him. You know, in our party, we don't denigrate our former colleagues. We pay tribute to their public service. That's how it should be. In terms of acoustic cameras, I'm very grateful to the speeches that have already been made, including all the wonderful maiden speeches. A point I'd like to make is that supercars and hot hatches and the associated noise, it affects some of the poorest and most vulnerable residents in the borough. You know, if you have the advantage of living on a quiet, expensive cul-de-sac without much road noise, you know, perhaps supercars aren't a big issue for you. But I can assure you that if you do rent a small flat on a busy red route and can't get to sleep at 4 in the morning because you have to work the next day in a demanding job, it's very important. It can cause severe mental health distress. So this is not a fringe issue. This is a very important issue for some of the poorest people in the borough. The second point I'd like to make is the knock-on effect, the positive effect of preventing this supercar noise. There's associated antisocial behaviour and problems with various street racing gangs that can come into the borough because of this street noise. So, for instance, when we've had street racing on Queen's Gate, the road itself, residents have sometimes wanted to come down and challenge those street racing gangs, but they're fearful of leaving their own homes because of how intimidating some of these gangs can be. Mr. Mayor, we say that although these acoustic cameras don't carry criminal penalties, or they're not necessarily targeted at the most serious criminal behaviour, by penalising these street racers, it will lead to a positive knock-on effect of less crime and make the area nicer for all of our residents who aren't afraid to leave their homes in the early hours of the morning. Finally, I would just like to lobby in my own ward's interest. I know Queen's Gate, the road itself, is a hot spot for supercars and hot hatches. Similarly, the Cromwell Road, which is a red route which adjoins Queen's Gate, again, has some of the worst examples of this. So we are very much looking forward to potentially acoustic cameras in the ward and hopefully TfL consent on the Cromwell Road. Finally, I would just like to say thank you to you all for your support in my maiden speech, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Councillor Lane, congratulations on your maiden speech. Councillor Wheel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening's become like one of those parlour games I'm really bad at, where you have to remember a cuddly toy and a toaster. So many people have made their maiden speeches. I'm not going to name them all, but isn't it wonderful that so many people have made their maiden speech on this, our first full council meeting? I think it's such a good sign and very exciting. I really only rise to just to echo what Councillor McVeigh said. The fact that we couldn't get an acoustic camera on our noisiest street means that some of these racers are riding a coach and however many horsepower through our efforts to try and bear down on this noise with acoustic cameras. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that TfL are being so obstructive, because whatever we do on other streets, we're still leaving a great gap in our borough where we cannot put acoustic cameras at the moment, and I say shame on them.
Councillor Wheel, thank you. Councillor Hargreaves, thank you for being patient.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just again to congratulate all those speakers who made their maiden speeches tonight. I've ticked several here, but they're all excellent speeches and we welcome them here to this chamber. Just to build on what we're saying here is that I totally support this motion and where the focus has been slightly on noisy cars, but actually with the noisy cars often go speeding cars and often go cars in groups. And we get that along the embankment all the time. And it's incredibly noisy, it's incredibly speedy, and it's dangerous that they operate in groups. So we need to think about this in the round as well, because without the support from TfL, we won't get this action done on these major roads. We fought for ages to get joint across the chamber with Councillor Bakhtiar to get a motion for 20 miles an hour. That has happened, but it took TfL a lot longer to make the red route for 20 miles an hour. We finally got it. So now we need to make sure that the cars on there are going at 20 miles an hour, are not making a noise, and are not operating in mass groups. So I support this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pascal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add my congratulations to Councillors for Burton, Benton, Hudd, Ahmed, Knight, Mackover and Lane for their excellent speeches tonight.
That's your 5 minutes.
I also would like to support the motion and call for TfL to enable acoustic cameras, which have, by the way, been largely funded by the residents' own ward sill funds. And I think this reflects the wishes of local ward residents in many cases. This is but one example of London's mayor not serving residents. Apart from the current tube and rail chaos we have currently outside this chamber, the mayor proposes to withdraw buses. TfL, or trending...
Mr. Mayor, when our residents asked us to tackle noise pollution, it was one of the biggest items in my mailbag, both as a lead member for Planning, Place and the Environment and also as a Holland Ward councillor, as we've already heard very eloquently, including from Councillor Oretti tonight. We installed cameras in the first instance in Knightsbridge, and as we've heard, they resulted in several hundred fines and 0 repeat offenders. And that's why we took the action of expanding our PSPO, the Public Spaces Protection Order, and had the first borough-wide order anywhere in the country. This is trailblazing work that everybody in the chamber should feel pride about. We have now got cameras in places from Royal Hospital to Norland Ward, we've had some, and in other places in between. And I very much hope they'll become a feature in the north of the borough too, if councillors work with residents on producing bids. We've seen interest in this from other councils across London, including from our neighbours in Westminster, and from the Department of Transport, who have welcomed the work we've done as they pursue the project on their terms. We've also had interest overseas from Europe, America and Australasia, so this really has been a global success and something, again, that has been a great thing. But we know that the problem of noisy vehicles persists in Kensington and Chelsea. And I know that the majority of complaints come from roads that are managed by Transport for London. That's why this is an important motion. Whilst TfL do support the work in principle, it's certainly true that they could have acted sooner, and we would have liked to have seen progress accelerated. I understand that at last, next week, structural testing of lamp columns on Holland Road might get underway. And thereafter, I hope we can very swiftly get not only an increased vote share on Holland Road, but an acoustic camera on the street.
Energy and ideas. And I wanted to take this opportunity to do a tiny bit of advertising as we...
Would like to speak to this. I now invite Councillor Kamali as the lead member to respond to the debate for 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, what can be left to be said, to be honest? I think something that we've all noticed when we could just about hear our residents over the roar of these engines was just how important a good night's sleep is indeed for our residents, not least on Holland Road, where I'm sure they appreciated Councillor Oretti knocking on their doors and checking in on them. That said, to go on, every time I rise, we seem to have a new management to my right, but unfortunately we have the same management in City Hall, albeit he does move the building from time to time. Some of the issues have already been raised, the chipping paint being perhaps the most ludicrous. However, there are some other ones, some which are slightly more serious, but our officers have already solved these in the council, in the borough, and we've shown TfL officers how best to do it. These are things such as the clarifications on the electricity detail, the clarifications on the energy consumption, the structural assessments, technical notes, design codes, and checking the certificate is in accordance with Appendix J of CG 300, whatever on earth that might be. I should also, of course, have started by saying congratulations to everybody's maiden speech. Apologies for forgetting that earlier. I won't list everybody, but just to answer some of the people that have spoken tonight. Of course, Councillor Addenbrooke, it's absolutely ridiculous that your residents' money has been sat in a box gathering dust for the last 7 months. We have to get it up on a lamppost. Paint be damned. Councillor Knight, thank you. I know this was something that really came up a lot in Holland, and I hope I was there enough to hear from your residents as well. You mentioned the noise levels of these things. I think it's fair to say, and Councillor McVeigh referenced as well, these cars can make sounds that at close proximity sound as though you're standing next to a jet engine. This is clearly not acceptable in central London, nor is it really acceptable closer to Heathrow. But anyway, sleep deprivation you referenced, that's absolutely true. And as Councillor Oretti says, who needs even more sleep deprivation than parents with newborn babies? Councillor Mackover, I confess I wish they would slow down to look at the listed buildings as they race along Queensgate. You have some of the finest architecture in the borough, and all they have to do is come off the gas just that little, save some money and save some fuel, and actually have a look at the beautiful part of our borough. Soph, you've been an incredible driving force on this one, Councillor McVeigh. Cycling force, perhaps. You've got these cameras up and down all over Brompton and Handstown in partnership with your ward colleagues, and they've really definitely led the way. We've seen just how innovative Kensington and Chelsea can be in this regard. There's plenty more that we can do. I sense, given the length of speakers on this topic, my ward colleagues behind me are going to keep me a little bit busy on this. Yes, indeed. Councillor Lane, congratulations and welcome. Again, you're absolutely right. There is a mental health impact to noise pollution, and pollution indeed is something we're trying to tackle, not just air pollution, but noise pollution as well. And I think we have really shown that we are taking this seriously. Councillor Wheel, always great to hear your comments. They always make me laugh. I promise not to continue the parlour game before us, but you're absolutely right. It's often those with the smallest under the bonnet that have the loudest exhausts. Councillor Hargreaves, absolutely right, and very seriously, you know, speeding along the embankment we've seen in tragic circumstance very recently. You're absolutely right, we should be tackling this, and I know the 20 mile an hour took a long time to get installed. We really need the Mayor to not only help us with these cameras, but also to enforce the speeding that goes along in Chelsea Riverside and into Royal Hospital as well. I think we moved on to Councillor Pascal there. Yep, you referenced the paint again, absolutely right. I know you obviously live in close proximity to Councillor Addenbrooke, and perhaps has been telling you things at home. Councillor Thalasitis, well, thank you for passing on not just this element of your mailbag, but so much more as well. You've really helped, alongside Councillor McVeigh, to make KNC, as you mentioned, a leader not just in London, but also across the pond and also across the channel. So congratulations for that one. We just need to make sure our cameras get delivered before all these other places try and snaffle them up. So get your bids in on Ensil, and I'll mention that in a second. Councillor Will, thank you. You helped us in Royal Hospital with Councillor Campbell and myself to get one of these on Lower Sloane Street. And for those that don't know, our camera is installed very close to a traffic light. So it's not even speeding that's causing the over 70, 80 tickets that we've issued. It's people sitting there at the light, just revving for absolutely no purpose whatsoever other than to make some noise and trying to show off to whoever they may be showing off to, whoever's impressed by such antics. I should say, yes, as I mentioned, that Ensil is the way to get these on your streets. One of the best solutions to minimise the cost is to work across wards and put them on ward boundaries. They can be moved around as well. There is obviously a cost to these. Some of the money can be recovered through tickets, and hopefully we reach a point where we're issuing no tickets and actually everybody is abiding by the noise levels within the borough.
Councillor Kamali.
And I will say thank you there.
Thank you. I now invite Councillor Addenbrooke to respond to the debate for up to 5 minutes. Councillor Addenbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everything has been said. And I know Councillor Kamali knows that I want my camera out of the box and mounted up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Addenbrooke, for being commendably brief. I now put the motion to vote. Would those for the motion please show? Would those against the motion please show? Are there any abstentions? In which case, I declare the motion carried unanimously. I am now going to go away for a short while to stretch my legs, so I hand over to my Deputy, Councillor Evans, as Deputy Mayor.
Good evening. This is my maiden motion. So we had a discussion whether to carry on, and I assured the mayor that everyone would be to the point and brief so that we can eat at 9:30, and especially since many of the points were made already on the bus routes. So motion 4 is on the subject of cuts to bus routes. I call on Councillor Tom Bennett to formally move the motion, standing in his name, and Councillor Sidney Yangston to second.
I beg to move.
I beg to second.
Councillor Bennett to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor, and I will do my utmost to be brief as requested. Firstly, I won't list them all, but firstly, just want to give my thanks to all our new members here today and congratulate you on your maiden speeches. And I look forward to my colleague, Redcliffe colleague, Councillor Yangston's maiden speech very shortly. Madam Deputy Mayor, in short, the point of this motion is for this council to publicly oppose, in the strongest possible terms, the bus cuts that have been put forward by Transport for London and the Mayor of London. I just want to go into a bit of detail on the impact of these cuts and also the responsibility. I think it's important we cover both. So firstly on the impact, I mean the impact really cannot be underestimated. I'm sure the same is true for many colleagues, have had numerous residents write into me on this and talk about just what a negative effect these cuts will have on their life. I quote one resident here. She wrote to me, said, I'm not normally one to write in or complain. And in this case, it was true. Normally when it starts with that, it's a lie. But in this case, it was true. But the Mayor's proposed cuts are really upsetting me. I work long hours in the city, and as a young woman, I'm happy to know I won't have to wait long at a bus stop at night to get home. SW10 doesn't have a tube station, and there is a congestion charge in the city centre. How am I supposed to get to and from work without a bus? And that was the number 11 bus that she was taking. I was speaking also to an elderly resident in my ward who regularly uses the 11 and 14, both of which are proposed to be cut. And she, due to mobility issues, struggles to use the underground. And so she uses buses as her primary means of transport to go to work, to go to the doctor, to visit her family. And these cuts will substantially deteriorate her quality of life. That is the reality. Many more, as I say, have written in and have made a number of valid points, including the fact that number 14, which is proposed to be cut, stops not just at Chelsea and Westminster, but also at the Royal Marsden, and is vital for people who need to visit the hospital, especially those who unfortunately have regular appointments at the hospital. So I think it's quite clear that the impact of these proposed cuts is frankly devastating. On the responsibility, there has been in the media a fair amount of the blame game being played. The Mayor has uncharacteristically declined to accept responsibility for these cuts. He says that he needs more money from government without it to bail out TfL, and without it he has no option but to enact these cuts. But he does fail to mention the government has bailed him out bailed out TfL due to the losses they've incurred from the pandemic to the tune of £5 billion. He fails also to mention the decisions that he and Transport for London have made. In 2016, he pledged a fare freeze. Now, anyone who works in business knows if you freeze your source of income and your costs, are going to continue to go up, there will be a funding gap. And that's the real cause of the long-term financial instability of Transport for London. He and TfL have also made the decision to disproportionately place the cuts on frontline services. And he fails to mention that there's over 500 TfL employees earning more than £100,000, and that's not where they're choosing to make the cuts. He also fails to mention his decision to disproportionately make the cuts in our part of London. And given our experience with South Kent Station, Kensington Forum Hotel, we can draw our own conclusions as to why they've made that decision. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, TfL must accept some level of responsibility for these cuts, and they must accept that it is within their power to change the plans and to predominantly reverse the proposed cuts. As the motion says, this proposal is in every way a backward step. It's a backward step economically, as we're trying to get back on our feet after COVID. It's a backward step environmentally, because fewer people will be taking public transport.
I have to call you to finish.
Just final sentence, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just want to say, most of all, it's a backward step in terms of the human cost that it will drive and the huge decrease in the quality of life of many of our residents who need to go to the doctors and to work. Thank you.
Councillor Yangson, do you wish to speak at this point?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'd like to congratulate all those fellow members of all parts of the House on their maiden speeches. And I'd also like to pay special tribute to Charles Williams, who, of course, for two reasons, of course, was my predecessor in Redcliffe Ward, but also sat in your chair as Mayor and looked after all of the residents of this council. So I'd like to pay special tribute to Charles. I'd also like to pay direct tribute to my two councillors, Rossi and to Bennett, who have given me a lot of help in both canvassing and walking around the ward and talking to residents, but also in making sure that I was properly prepped to come and help do what I have to do here and represent my residents in the most strongest way. I first moved into the borough and rented my first flat in 1994, and I served in the British Army Reserves for about 6 years, and I've always been passionate in putting people's rights and their views forward. So one of the things that I plan to do here is to be a strong voice for my residents and make sure that we can hold people to account that need to be held to account. So in relation to this motion, there are 3 points I'd like to cover. Councillor Bennett has mentioned a couple of them, but the first one is hospitals. The second one I'll be mentioning is going to be old age pensioners and people with freedom passes getting mobility. And the third one, which is probably the most important, is late night safety within the city. In relation to Fulham Road and the 3 hospitals, SW10, as we all know, doesn't have a tube stop, and as I watch the the bus routes on the Fulham Road, I see between 150 to 250 people an hour getting on and off buses. And these are people going to hospital for treatments, and they are workers, they are cleaners, they are porters, people working in the hospitals. And this council and this group, we support workers and we support businesses, and these people must be helped, because it cannot be right that 150 people an hour driving to hospitals is clearly a complete nonsense. Councillor Bennett's also mentioned the Marsden. The Marsden, of course, is a national cancer hospital, and we've got people who can't walk for 15, 20 minutes from the local tube to get to their oncology appointment. So it's absolutely vital that these routes are not cut, and they must be protected for our residents. Looking at the second point, which is what I call the Freedom Pass, part of what I do as an Army reservist or former Army reservist is helping old age pensioners who've 80 plus, who've served in the Army, who live alone. And they come to visit me in the ward by coming on the bus using their Freedom Pass. It's fair to say that there are lots of residents that I've met over the last 2 or 3 weeks as I've walked the ward have also said they get around to meet their friends because they live on their own. They need the buses to be there. They don't take the tube because it's not there. They need access to buses. So it's an absolutely vital part of supporting the people that have helped us get to where we are as a country, that we give them the freedom and we don't take it away by taking away their bus routes. And then the final point I'll make is in terms of late night security. We all know what happens when things go wrong in this country. The Sarah Everard case is a classic case on that. The N11, I think, is one of the routes that's going to be cut. And if I'm a shift worker and I leave the hospital at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't really want to have to walk miles to get to the nearest tube at night if I'm a girl and it's raining and it's the middle of winter. So it's absolutely vital that these transport links are maintained, these transport links are provided so that our residents can go about their lives, but go about their lives safely, because it's clearly unacceptable to have late night danger because night buses have been cut. So just to summarise, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must make sure that these bus routes are maintained for our residents across the borough to make sure that people can get to work and get to the hospitals and get around the place. We must look after the people that are the most vulnerable, who are mobility challenged and can't get to a tube. And the key one I mentioned at the end there, late night safety. It's an absolutely fundamental part of what I think the Conservatives stand for, that we make sure that everybody's safe. It's certainly a manifesto pledge. So I do congratulate my fellow councillors. I won't name them all in the parlour game trick, but I congratulate them all on their maiden speeches, and I commend this motion to this House.
Congratulations, Councillor Yankson, on your maiden speech. Perfect timing. I'll now open up the debate. Councillor Greg Hammond, do you wish to speak? You've indicated.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and I'm very pleased to see you, ma'am, in your seat for the first time chairing a debate. And I'd also like to congratulate my friend Councillor Yankson on a very incisive maiden speech, and I hope that's the first of many speeches we hear over a long term in this council chamber. And without naming them, congratulations also to everybody else who has spoken tonight. I think we've been treated to some very interesting and energetic new speeches. Now I'm going to indulge in some Sadiq Khan bashing, and on this particular issue, I hope perhaps the party opposite might like to join me in it, because frankly he's anti-bus, and you can look at that. If you look at his 2016-2017 transport strategy, buses are a low priority for him. It's been there from the beginning, so when he's had to make cuts, it's always the buses that seem to bear the brunt of those cuts. And as we've heard so movingly from Councillor Bennett and from Councillor Yankson, it's often the most vulnerable and the most needy people that suffer from bus cuts and who depend most on the buses. And the reason we're in this mess, well, we've heard some of that from Councillor Bennett as well. Of course, there's the pandemic. I'm generous enough to admit that that is part of it. But he has had a huge bailout from the government. And even before the pandemic, TfL's finances were heading down the pan. And we've heard about the fares freeze. I mean, it's all very nice as a passenger, but there's an economic reality. I could also mention the hopper fare. Again, very nice, but estimates are that it's cost TfL £100 million in revenue. TfL thought it would be 30 million, but it's been, not surprisingly, quite popular. It's cost 100 million. These gaps create a financial crisis for TfL, and we're now bearing the brunt. I'd like to mention a few specific bus routes, because they're very important to my residents in Courtfield Ward in South Kensington. The number 74 and the N74, Councillor Verboven mentioned those from Earls Court. I've lived in the borough all my life on the number 74 route. I've used that bus for longer than Councillor Lari's been alive, I think. It's been a very important bus to me, as indeed has the N74. We've heard from my Redcliffe ward neighbours about the number 14 that goes along Fulham Road, a 24/7 bus. Again, another very important one. for us, and in fact I'll be using that on Saturday for my haircut because it takes me to my barber. And absolutely, if I don't walk, because I might, it's 3 miles, but the 14 is the ideal bus to go there, and that's another problem. But it's easy to talk about the buses, Madam Deputy Mayor, that are going to be abolished in this proposal. But we also need to, it's such a wide-ranging proposal that we need to think about the bus routes that are being cut short or amended. So, a couple of good examples. The number 49, very useful bus from north to south of the borough at the moment. It will stop at South Kensington. It won't go to Chelsea anymore. So that's fine for me, but many colleagues and many people live in Chelsea, and that bus is going to disappear. The number 211, this is another one I use quite regularly. It goes along the Fulham Road, and it goes to Waterloo. Very useful bus indeed, going to Waterloo. The new terminus for the number 211 will be Battersea Power Station. Now, I've got nothing against Battersea Power Station. I'm sure it's a very interesting place to visit, probably very nice when you get there, but it's not exactly useful. Waterloo is an international travel hub. Surely that's where we want to have a bus link to, not Battersea Power Station. So these are ill-thought-out proposals. And I think this motion says it all. It demands that this council puts in a most robust counter and opposition to TfL's proposal. And therefore, I do commend the motion to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. I now call on Councillor Walla Idris. You're on the list here. No, you read.
No.
Okay.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Kasim Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and may I congratulate you for your position just before the Mayor comes back and takes over. Madam Deputy Mayor, I think I do not want to speak on this motion, but I think I need to get some facts right, and it's important. It's important to. Okay. Shall I wait for the handover?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, for this opportunity to speak again. I would like to get some facts right, but let me start with congratulating all the new councillors for their maiden speech, especially Councillor Sidney Youngson for his maiden speech. And I think it's important to remember what you've just said for him serving our armed forces. And this week, part of the Armed Forces Week, I think it's important to thank for those ex-soldiers who served our country and who served to keep us safe, and hopefully the whole country will be united to support them, and so no ex-services will be homeless. And it started with Kensington and Chelsea. We will give special priorities for those who have served our country to the best of their ability, and some of them have paid the ultimate price, should never be homeless on the roughest sleeping or any other situation. The government should also get its act together, and we will hopefully contribute to that. Coming back to the point, Mr. Mayor, I think London Mayor Sadiq Khan knows buses a lot more than I think more of us. Maybe it's, apart from me, because I have been a bus driver myself. I have actually driven buses in the borough, and I'm talking about from first-hand experience. So please do listen when I say this because this is first-hand experience. I may have been the first ever bus driver being elected here, and hopefully not the last one. So the journey will continue. As a former bus driver, I do support and acknowledge the hard-working bus drivers across the borough and across London to keep our services going. I also understand the tough times that we are in, and the cuts we're definitely not welcoming, and we do not like to see bus drivers losing their jobs and residents not making to where they want their destinations. But the fact of the problem is that we need to understand and acknowledge where the real problem is. The real problem is not with Mayor Sadiq Khan. The real problem is with the government, the Conservative-led Boris Johnson government, and that is where the problem is. he managed to cut all the services, at least to make sure that London can suffer. Well, this is not the mayor of London, and he has done this before, and we know him from his record. We also remember the police station and the cuts to the police, so that even us, our borough is now saving Notting Hill Police Station to make sure that we keep the services we can give to our residents. It's all down to conservative cuts. But what is the problem? The problem is the Boris Johnson-led government blames others. And I'm not surprised that now he's blaming the hard-working Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, for a fault not on his own. So I will urge my fellow councillors at this chamber to work and to lobby and to support so that we can keep these buses and we can keep the routes. As a former bus driver, please do lobby and back to the government, and especially say to Councillor Tom Bennett, whom I know has the skills, but this time will be forgiven for not doing his homework, because it's not London Mayor is doing the hardship, it's the Conservative-led Boris Johnson government. So please go back to the Prime Minister and allow to keep our service going, especially this during difficult times. Once again, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Could I now call Councillor Zvedeniuk, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I speak on this motion, I'd like to congratulate all the other new councillors on delivering their maiden speeches today. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the outgoing Chelsea Riverside councillors, Adrian Beryl-Cox and Alison Jackson, both of whom made a great contribution. Adrian's hard work as chair of the budget working group was vital to ensuring we had a balanced budget in line with the council's priorities. And Alison's hard work really brought Chelsea Riverside's heritage to life, highlighting our artistic heritage and supporting residents in ensuring we make sensible planning decisions that are in keeping with the character of the neighbourhood. And of course, all her fantastic work with the Chelsea Theatre to open up creative opportunities for everyone in the ward and in the local area. I hope to continue this legacy to celebrate culture and heritage, revitalise our gardens and river spaces, back small business, support families, and put the safety and welfare of residents first. It's a huge privilege and a huge honour to represent Chelsea Riverside on the council. I'm truly grateful to everyone in the ward. It was a tight race, and we'll always strive to do right by and engage with all residents of all backgrounds across the entire ward. And that's why I'm pleased to speak on this important motion today. So many people in Kensington and Chelsea are reliant on these bus routes. I regularly use the 11, the C3, the 49 as well, day to day. Chelsea Riverside is one of the few wards in central London not served by the London Underground. That makes Chelsea residents particularly dependent on bus routes as their form of public transport. Chelsea Riverside has the highest proportion of residents who travel to work by bus of any ward in Kensington and Chelsea, and one of the highest in London. For many, including the elderly and the disabled, there's simply no alternative. And yet, Chelsea is where Sadiq Khan has decided to concentrate his cuts on buses. His proposals to cut routes 11, 14, 74, and C3 and others will be devastating locally and absolutely decimate connectivity in Chelsea. Not only that, but Route 11 is an iconic Kings Road route. It's one of the oldest routes in London. It was introduced in 1906 and has operated continuously since then. Nowhere in London will feel the force of his cuts as much as Kensington and Chelsea, particularly in Chelsea. And given the area's dependence on buses, Khan is effectively leaving residents stranded. The proposed cuts are totally inconsistent as well with our efforts to reduce congestion and the number of cars on the road. The London Mayor is chair of Transport for London, and despite this, Labour will claim that it's anyone's fault but his. Sadiq Khan had a choice, and he chose to cram as many cuts as he could into our borough and into Chelsea in particular, picking on residents, not least on the World's End estate, who are among the most dependent on buses of any residents in our city. This puts politics before public service and public transport. It is imperative all councillors back this motion and send a signal that Khan's cuts cannot fall on those who have no alternative. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Many congratulations, Councillor Zvedeniuk, on your maiden speech. Councillor Thalasitis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to all of the maiden speeches over the past 20 or 30 minutes since I last said that. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, campaigned to unite Londoners when he took office, and I don't think he had in mind to bring together forces as disparate as Unite the Union, who was seen petitioning against bus cuts in the borough last week, and our local MPs and councillors, from Greg Hands to Felicity Buchan, and colleagues, I'm sure, hoping across the chamber. Mr. Mayor, as a boy, not that long ago, I used to get the 11 bus to my football training on Ilbrick Common. My mum would get the 49 bus to do her weekly shop. My dad, when he got sick, got the 211 to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And there are thousands of such stories across the borough, and these are all routes that the Mayor of London is determined to cut. 18% of bus routes across central London, and from social occasions to regular chores and vital appointments, these all have an impact. Nor was this a bolt from the blue, but it was carefully planned. I sat on the London Council's Transport Committee and heard TfL officers dissemble, knowing that severe cuts were coming to the centre of the city at a time when we could least afford that. Bus routes are critical to London's economic recovery. It's not just a borough issue, this is a central London issue. And they've been brought forward, these cuts, the month after the local elections, away from voters' gaze, if they could possibly manage it. Mr. Mayor, at a time when unions are running riot over Sadiq Khan and bringing the city to a standstill through strikes, it's all the more important we have good bus links. Likewise, at a time of rising fuel prices, it's all the more important we have good bus links. And Mr. Mayor, as I've said, at a time when the city fights to recover from COVID, we know that although footfall is at pre-pandemic levels in Chelsea, it's down by 20 to 30% in the West End. It's vital that we have proper, good, vital bus services in this borough. So I sincerely hope against hope that the Mayor reconsiders, or is made to reconsider by the strength of public opinion, and that vital bus services are brought back after the consultation. I commend this motion to the Chamber.
Councillor Thalasitis and Councillor Lowry, it is approaching 9:30, and I am not convinced that we're going to get through the whole of this motion before then. So please can I ask
let's
you to move
Can we finish
Standing
this
Order
motion?
2401 to allow the meeting to finish at the end of this motion.
Yeah.
And then to go through all the other business as quickly as we can.
Sure. Can we do it very quickly, though?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, can I just start by saying I love parlour games. And we've had 9 maiden speeches here tonight, which I think probably must be a council record. So I would like to join my colleagues and thank, first of all the new councillors who are here tonight, but to thank Councillor Bobovan, Councillor Benton, Councillor Hudd, Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Knight, Councillor Mackover, Councillor Lane, Councillor Jackson, and oh, I forgot you, Sonia. And Sonia as well. So thank you very much for your excellent speeches. And I think while we're in that sort of ebullient mood, I'd also like to thank the Labour group, because again, I mean, we've had 2 motions so far where we have unanimously agreed. So if this is new management, long may it live, that's what I say. And this is your opportunity to get a full house. So, first of all, let me just say that in a week when we have suffered yet more strikes and more misery on the tubes, it really is shocking that the Mayor is seeking to put more misery on us and our residents by cutting our much-loved networks. And a number of those networks actually go within my ward, within Stanley, and I think it's already been referenced. You know, they serve 3 hospitals, Brompton, Marsden, and the Chelsea and Westminster. And this is, buses are used, as again has been mentioned, for our most vulnerable residents. And it's their only way to get to the bus, because let us remember that the tubes, they don't have step-free access. A bus is the best form of access for these vulnerable people to get to our hospitals. And despite us wishing to provide £7.5 million of funding towards step-free, we got a very large raspberry on that one. So these brutal cuts to vital bus routes mean that our vulnerable residents are really unable to make these appointments, and that, I think, is absolutely appalling. And I really just end by talking about the noble bus drivers, of which, obviously, the London Mayor and one of our councillors here offer that. And I would just like to say that at the rate that the buses are being cut, your profession is going to be a very rare breed indeed. Thank you.
I now invite Councillor Kamali as the lead member to respond to the debate for up to 5 minutes, but it doesn't have to be 5 minutes.
No, I will try indeed. I'll try indeed to be very brief. Well, I think the Mayor has managed it. He's managed to cut more buses than we've had maiden speeches here tonight. So for that, I suppose, small consolation. Councillor Bennett, thank you for raising this alongside your ward colleague, Councillor Yankson, and a brilliant speech there tonight. You're absolutely right, £5 billion. I mean, it beggars the mind to try and put that into context as to how much money that absolutely is. And it's absolutely ludicrous that they brought this forward just after the successful launch of Crossrail, or the Elizabeth line, as it's now rightly called. Really disappointing to see him now making cuts just after such a brilliant addition to the public service network. Councillor Yankson, yes, and it's mentioned again, hospitals. I mean, this is just bizarre, mad decision-making by the Mayor. He expects residents and visitors to hop between buses, to hop from one bus to another in disparate parts of the borough. This doesn't make sense. There is only one place on the bus for a disabled person in a wheelchair to be parked and be placed, alongside people with buggies. Cutting any buses deprives that person of a place of a way to get to the hospital, to get around our borough. And whilst the Mayor, I'm sure, is determined to split us in half by cutting the 49 bus, he has, in fact, perhaps managed it in that regard, in that you'll no longer be able to get from Chelsea Town Hall to Kensington Town Hall. So I suppose he's step by step trying to get his ambitions filled. This is a man who, after all, chooses to use a Range Rover to get around London. So perhaps he does still have a small inkling of support for the Chelsea tractor. He clearly doesn't have any support for the Chelsea bus, or the Kensington buses indeed. Councillor Hammond, thank you. You're absolutely right. He is anti-bus, which is even more bizarre given he's the son of a bus driver. I think if that was my child, I'd be a little bit disappointed in such behaviour. So perhaps his father might want to call him in for dinner one night this week and have a word with him. You referenced Waterloo, and indeed, as Abba perhaps said, this is a battle... sorry, let me get the lyric right. We... fought the war? No, I forgot it now. What's the lyric? Moving on. We lose when we win. Exactly. Sorry. I had it written down properly and I've lost it. Councillor Ali, thank you. The bus driver amongst us, absolutely right. We've had one, we've waited a long time for them, and we look for 3 to come along at once in the not too distant future. You referenced the Mayor of London and the Prime Minister being anti-London. I find that strange, given he represented London for a number of years and actually turned the budget into a surplus year on year for TfL. Disappointing to see you now think he dislikes London so much. I think actually the root cause of this is indeed his freeze on travel fares. Whilst it's absolutely right to keep money in people's pockets, you have to make the efficiencies at the same time in order to deliver those freezes, or here we are many years later dealing with the ramifications of those choices from years gone by. Councillor Thalasitis, you're absolutely right. They obviously had these planned, they knew it was coming, and rather than announce it prior to the election, they've waited to announce these at the most opportune time for themselves, and it's just rightly disappointing that you'll no longer be able to take the 11 to play football in Ilbrook Common. I hope you'll be cycling or walking there instead. And then Councillor Taylor-Smith, yes, you mentioned the strikes. It's absolutely disappointing to see that the one part of the public transport that continues to function is indeed the buses, whilst all the trains and the tubes have been cut. These are the bus drivers, the noble bus drivers, as you called them, who worked throughout COVID, moving people around, key workers around the borough, around London, and yet here they are now facing redundancy and cuts to their services just so soon after COVID has come to an end. So I think that pretty much covers everything. I will indeed get reprimanded by my Swedish wife for forgetting the ABBA lyrics, so I'll go home and put it on shuffle. So thank you very much.
I now invite Councillor Bennett to respond to the debate.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make corrections, please? 1 minute. Thank you.
Not for a minute, you've got about 30
yeah,
seconds.
that's fine. I think it should be good to remember that I've driven a bus 10 years ago now, so that the council officers could not come back and say, why didn't you declare your interest of profession? So for the record, I did drive a bus when I was at university.
That is
Thank you.
noted. Councillor Bennett.
Yes, no, very little to add, Mr. Mayor, other than to thank everyone for their excellent speeches, especially the new members, and Councillor Yankson and Councillor Zvedeniak. Both gave excellent speeches, and also our colleague from across the aisle, Councillor Ali, gave a very good speech. And when he can draw up an image in front of the chamber of this poor, hard-working mayor who's just trying to do his best for the residents of Kensington and Chelsea, I can tell that he's going to go very far in politics. Anyway, other than that, I would just say I commend the motion to the House, and I hope that we can get the full House of unanimous motions that Councillor Taylor-Smith mentioned.
I now put the motion to the vote. Would those for the motion please show? Would those against the motion please show? Are there any abstentions? I declare the motion carried. An appointment, item 14, appointments to committees and outside organisations. Have any appointments been made either by you, Councillor Thalasites, or by you, Councillor Lowry? In that case, I declare that does not need to be carried. That concludes the business of this evening's meeting of the Council. The next meeting of the Council is scheduled to be held on the 20th of July. Good evening.